Everybody, and welcome to the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors meeting scheduled for this day, June 27th, 2017. We have returned from closed session and are now going to begin our regularly scheduled agenda. We'll pause briefly for a moment of reflection. Thank you. Chief Probation Officer Raymond, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Introduction to new employees. And we've got music to go. This is great. Very well done.
I'm really pleased to introduce Crystal Nielsen, who is a new program manager for social services. Crystal's with us today.
Good morning, Crystal.
She's been working in social services for 10 years and recently finished her master's degree in social work. So really happy to have her.
Congratulations.
Welcome aboard, Crystal. Others, Jay, or is that the last? Okay, terrific. All right, County Council, any items to report out of closed session?
Yes, with a motion by Supervisor Gitlin and second by Supervisor Berkowitz, one workers' comp case, motion to settle passed 5-0.
Thank you very much. All right, at this time, I'd like to request any deletions, corrections, or additions from the board members to the agenda. In order to add an addition to the agenda, the matter must have come up to the attention of the county subsequent to the posting of the agenda, and the matter requires action before the next regular scheduled meeting. Any items from the board? Seeing none. Okay.
Chair Howard, I believe item 6 and the chief probation officers here may need to be pulled.
Is that correct? Okay, very good. Thanks for the heads up. Board will take note that item number 6 will be pulled from the consent agenda. Okay, at this time I'm gonna move a few things out of order. One of the issues that the county deals with quite frequently in these days is budgets, and we've got a fairly healthy budget discussion to discuss today, and I'm going to take that out of order. And while we have a fairly large audience today, I'd like the board to discuss our draft budget for this year. Jay, I know this might be a surprise, but if you're ready, I'd like you to kick off our item number 41, which is a discussion of our draft budget.
Okay. So before the board today is the approval and adoption of the 2017-2018 fiscal year recommended budget. This is the first step in getting to the final budget, which is a required balanced budget. This budget at this point is showing a deficit of approximately $2.7 million. The process that we go through is to receive requested budgets from each department. That will include the annual financing that they've requested of the Board of Supervisors consideration. We meet with each of those and get explanations and talk about individual lines, and hopefully a good understanding of why they have presented the budget that they presented. We utilize the year-end fund balance when the auditor controller has the final closure of the fiscal year budget available to determine what we have available to offset any deficit at this point. We won't know that until the end of July, probably around that point. Then we will come back with a presentation to the board talking about what we have available or not available, and talk about priorities. The formal process actually starts on September 8th, and then there are hearings that can be set. And at the end of all of that, by October 2nd, there needs to be a balanced budget. We cannot run a deficit. Today, what we're asking for are some preliminary steps to be taken in order to have spending authority between now and the final budget. The budget before you reflects priorities of prior boards and a lot of the mandated costs associated with providing the services that we provide. We're primarily focused on the general fund because that's the discretionary fund to the larger extent that the board has available to them. A smaller portion of that is truly discretionary. So what we're talking about are a lot of the budgets that are related to public safety. So public defense, prosecution through the DA's office, the sheriff's office, the jail, and also before you today, though, are the non-general fund departments that have their own allocations and do have an effect on the general fund through transfers for services. But primarily what we're focusing on is the general fund at this point. The recommendations for the board's action is to discuss and take action as necessary to approve the 17-18 fiscal year recommended budgets as presented by departments, establish and eliminate positions within budget units as outlined in attachment A, approve the position list request for wireless device stipends as provided in the adopted wireless device policy. There may be some additional positions that come forward on the wireless device stipend in the next few meetings. They are requested to turn those in. If a department failed to turn them in on time, they're not listed on this. Direct the budget team to continue to research and analyze all available cost savings options. That's pretty obvious. We continue to do that until there is a balanced budget, and then we start over for the next fiscal year. Direct departments that no fixed asset purchases shall be allowed prior to the adoption of the final budget without budget or Board of Supervisors approval. For obvious reasons, if we're in a deficit, we're not looking at spending funds on a fixed asset anytime before now and when the board makes its final decision on a final budget. Direct departments and no budget transfers will be allowed to transfer funds from salaries and benefits to any other expense line unless determined to be an emergency by the county administrator and auditor controller. That's to make sure that any budget lines that would happen to be overspent quickly won't be overspent. And also later on, you'll have the same recommendation as part of the final budget because these funds are specifically earmarked for salaries and benefits and not for individual service and supply lines. So that's the reason for that one in there. And then accept the recommended children's budget as presented. This began about a year ago. This is just an accept. It isn't to adopt because it's a variety of lines from different budgets, primarily health and human services related, but it also includes juvenile hall and recreation. So those budgets are included in there also. It gives information on what money is being spent on children in the county. And that was begun, and I'm assuming at this point that that will be continued through this board. The budget process itself, as I mentioned, starts early. In this case, it's April. And we meet with the different departments to go over what their requests are. The primary issues end up being the net county cost, and there is a report in there that shows you the departments have the largest net county cost. Currently, that would be the jail and sheriff combined. That isn't out of the ordinary in most cases, but it is indicative of this year also. There's a lot of discussion regarding revenue and potential revenue and projections that are coming in. Once again, we'll know actuals in about a month as to how our projections will actually be placed in the budget. The recommended, as I mentioned, is an interim spending plan, and the Treasury has the funds to be able to cover that for the next 3 months if it takes that long. And at this point, if there are any comments regarding the recommended budget, or if there are any recommendations from the board, we can certainly take those and start to build those in once we know what that fund balance is and what we have to work with. This will be one opportunity to do that. I expect there to be at least 2 more opportunities.
Very good. Thank you, Jay. I'd like to bring it back to the board and kick this discussion off. Supervisor Gitlin, please.
Yes, thank you, Jay. Jay, for public edification, could you give us the numbers, the figures for last year's general fund budget?
In what way?
Well, 24
approximately
million.
$24 million.
Okay, I just want the public to know what we're dealing with as we move forward on these discussions.
And for this year, the general fund allocation or budgeted projection is,
Approximately 25.
thank you. And that increase is,
Typically, what you're seeing in there will be salaries and benefits, along with any other types of funds that come in that could be receipt through grants, could be changes in revenue. There are a lot of factors that go into this. Obviously, you see the large pile of documents that were turned out. Each budget can have increases in revenue or expenditures in any given year, which will reflect in the overall general fund. Right now, our economy is growing at a rate that it's relatively steady, but it's slow in the sense that the amounts are not very high. So you should see some increase in our general fund over the next couple of years also. Some of the items that can affect that could be, like I said, grant-funded projects where you see a fairly significant amount of revenue coming in, but there's also dedicated expenses for a project of some type.
thank you, Jay. Any other comments or discussion for Jay at this time from the board? Lori? Supervisor? Okay. I'd like to open it up for public comment at this time. Okay. Public comment on the draft budget. Terrific. Good morning. Please state your name for the record.
Sharon McKinney, 50-year resident of Del Norte County, 41 in District 1. I want to start by mentioning that there was no agenda posted outside in your reader board.
Okay.
I think you're supposed to do that. You will be talking about intersections later, and I want to say that I have given up on Cooper and J Street changes. Mrs. Kunstel's committee says the intersection is too complicated and drivers are too hard to re-educate, so that's the end of that. Except I disagree. Uphill J Street drivers learn to stop at the illegal stop sign, and I know eastbound Cooper Street drivers know what a limit line, big STOP, and a red sign mean on the pavement. And if they did stop, the property owner wouldn't need to put up posts to keep cars off from his lawn. The city worker on the committee said moving the 30-mile speed limit sign could be done and placed at the bottom of the hill so drivers would not think they were at Sears Point Raceway. The first time I asked about changes a couple years ago, I had a call from a road guy who suggested that I walk somewhere else. And he also offered to build a real island so that I could wait there for a clear spot. Anyway, I came and told my concern, and that's what a good citizen does. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Appreciate your time. Any other comments on the draft budget before the board? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board at this time. So, Jay, this is to discuss and take action.
Yes, I went through the recommendations at
Yep.
the top.
Items
Again,
1 through 7.
just to reiterate, it's the interim spending plan until such time as we get to a final.
Correct.
And we
Sometime
have
in
restricted it
September.
through the recommendations fairly tightly until we get there so that we know what we're working with.
Very good. Thank you. Do I have a motion from the board at this time?
I make a motion.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
And a second. Kylie, can you please pull the vote?
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Chair Howard?
Can I make one
Please.
statement? Because sometimes I forget this, but I do want to thank the auditor controller.
I'm going to vote yes, but
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Jay.
Could you? You going to vote yes?
I just did. But
Sorry.
thank you. Please.
No,
vote.
I always seem to forget this, but I want to thank the department heads that worked on these. You know, this is just the start, but I don't want to forget it at the last meeting, so I'll say it now so that I can say thank you, and the effort that's put in by staff is considerable, and I don't want to diminish that in any way.
No, and we appreciate all the efforts. We know it's tight times. I know the board recognizes that. We have considerable debate, both before you and in public, and also in closed session about nature of our budget and how it impacts our community. And so we appreciate every bit of effort that goes into this, and more importantly, the department heads that help us get there. I want to apologize in advance for the long agenda. We just had quite a bit on our plate this week, but we'll move forward the best we can today, and please try to hang in there with us. But I thought the budget should come first, as it plays heavily on all our minds. So the first, I'd like to take up the consent agenda. That would be items 4, 5, minus 6, which has been pulled, items 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28 on our consent agenda. I didn't read them all off.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to pull for
Supervisor
discussion items 11 and 12 for discussion and clarification,
Okay.
and 25 and 26.
11, 12. What was the other one?
25 and 26.
5 and 26. First, I'd like to see if there's a motion on all consent agenda items except for items 25, 26, and 11 and 12.
So moved.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? And a second. Public comment on consent agenda items minus 25, 26, 11, 12, and 6. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board. Kylie, can you please pull the vote?
Supervisor Cowan?
Sorry, please step forward. We'll go ahead and hold this off. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm wondering if you pulled the one having to do with the number 11.
Yes, it has been pulled.
Okay.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Okay, seeing none, Kylie, can you please proceed with the poll vote?
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes, I need to recuse myself on item number 15. I have a conflict of interest.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Chair Howard?
Yes. Okay, let's go ahead and take up item number 11, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is really just for clarification, since I've received a number of calls from constituents asking about the nature of the agreement. I appreciate that Greg Burns was here presenting, but I think it's best that we underscore that. So Jay, if you wouldn't mind just telling us the cost of the contract is $60,000 per year, and what does it provide for us, so the public hears this again, so those folks who called me, they have an answer today.
The direct services are listed inside of your agenda there under the contract. I can go over some of the things that they've done and will be working on in the future. It's direct advocacy, lobbying for the county of Del Norte specifically, with the added involvement of other districts, possibly like the Harbor District, the city of Crescent City. In the past, the Board of Supervisors hasn't limited it to just within the county boundaries. It's been everything within the county, didn't matter what jurisdiction. So if somebody's had an issue, they bring it forward and we take that forward to our advocate, lobbyist. Several years ago, this firm was chosen through a competitive process and was the low bidder at the time. They have worked and will continue to work in regards to the harbor dredging. That was one of the immediate large ticket items that has been something that was very important to the harbor, actually. It was federal harbor channel dredging, and to the tune over a few years of about $5.7 million worth of work. That was a direct result of having that lobbyist in Washington meeting with the Corps of Engineers and people in there that we wouldn't have the day-to-day contact with. One of the other more significant ones was the hurdy-gurdy acquisition. Actually, they lobbied on our behalf and had funding taken out of a federal budget to give us the ability to have leverage to negotiate in regards to mitigation on hurdy-gurdy. That's a kind of a reverse way of going about getting leverage for our county and getting something that was important to the board. The airport AIP projects, those are projects that Ben Skoyak has been involved in for a number of years, taking into account what the staff at the airport bring forward, and then they advocate directly in Washington, D.C. EAS is another one of those. There have been a number of reauthorizations. Ben Skoyak has been our voice in Washington on each one of those reauthorizations. And when we need somebody to meet immediately, they're available to do that. Those are some of the examples. They also cover some of the services. Greg was here at the last meeting to give a report, which is typical of that contract. As part of the contract, he comes back here once to twice a year to report to the board what activities are there, take input from the board collectively, and I know all of you can talk to him individually. So they actually have 2 to 3 people that work for Delaware County. You met 2 of them when they were here. We've gone through a couple of staff members over the years. They've all been very professional and have advocated on behalf of Delaware County and not other entities in California. It's very important when you have somebody that's advocating for you that we don't have competitive counties or cities that they're also advocating for, because you don't get the full effort. I hope that gives you kind of an overview, but Greg's report was very comprehensive.
Very thorough.
Also.
Thank you, Jay. I'd like to go ahead and open it up for public comment on item number 11, please. Okay, very good. We'll bring it back to the board. Do we have a motion on the table?
I'll make that motion, Chairman, to approve and authorize the chair to sign the agreement with Van Skoyak Associates for federal government advocacy as requested by the CAO.
Thank you. And we have a motion, we have a second. Kylie, can you please pull the vote?
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Chair Howard?
Yes. All right, I'm going to quickly move to budget transfers, items number 29, 30, 31, 32, and 33, and 34. Let's go ahead and move to public comment on any of those items, which would be 06-09, 06-010, 06-12, 06-13, 06-14, 06-15. Ms. Snow, please.
I just want to clarify, there was a clerical error. Number 31 is for fiscal year 16-17.
Correct, but it was correct
There's no
in the
mistake on
board's
the
agenda.
actual transfer.
Correct, and
Yes.
we did see that. Thank you very much for that correction. Okay, any additional public comment on budget transfer items at this time?
Move for approval.
We have a motion on the table for approval.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Kylie, can you please pull the vote?
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Chair Howard?
Yes. All right. Okay. I'm going to, Supervisor Gitlin, on item 12, you got a fairly lengthy discussion on
No,
this?
I wanted to bring to the attention the agreement with the Area 1 Agency on Aging. I pulled it for discussion.
Okay.
I'll make this quick because I know we have public comments coming. Our county contribution to this program is $24,102. For some time, this agency has been operating in deficit mode, and per the agreement in the narrative, paragraph 14 entitles our board to access to the entire set of books, not just that which the Area 1 Agency on Aging wishes to forward to us. So I'd like to see their entire the agreement, their statement, and why they're in deficit mode, and see that we are in fact dealing with an agency that is intact and is able to perform into the future. It's $24,000 out of our general fund, and I'd like to see that before I will vote on it. And in absence of that, I can't approve that until we see their books. So that would be my statement.
Thank you. Supervisor?
Mr. Chairman, I have to agree with Supervisor Gitlin. I've been a member of their board several years ago, and it seemed to me that their budget was basically going into deficit. I'm concerned at this point that of their viability going forward, and I think it's probably a serious situation, but we have no idea of what their budget is. And even though they've given the Del Norte budget, I think unless we see the whole plan, I'm not sure I can approve this as is.
Thank you, Supervisor. Any additional comments from the board at this time?
Yeah, I think we receive much more in benefit than we pay, and I don't know what value there is in finding out what their entire budget is. I don't know what we can do about it. I've had discussions with them because I was on this board, or the advisory board at one time. They're not real happy to have us on board because we don't pay for all the services that they provide. So I think we're getting a great deal, and I would make a motion that we approve and authorize the chair to sign the agreement between the County of Del Norte and Area 1 Agency on Aging.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Can I make a quick comment also, Chris?
Please.
Chair Howard, I sit on that advisory board, and Supervisor Hemmingson is correct. We get, I think, to the tune of over $100,000 worth of benefit for the little $24,000 that we put into it. They're a big help. I don't know what our other options are out there. They have been around for a while, and I have not, as sitting on the board, have not seen any concern for the budget issues. And I'm not sure, I mean, if you want to see the budget, that's one thing about asking about that, and that's fine, but I don't see any reason of stopping to approve. So I would second his motion.
Thank you. Public comment on item number 12. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board. We have a motion and a second on the table. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. Kylie, can you please pull the vote?
Supervisor Gitlin?
No.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
No.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Chair Howard?
Yes. All right, we're going to go ahead and move to public comment, our 10:25 timed agenda item. This is for the public to address any items that are currently not on the board's agenda, but they feel are within the board's purview. Do we have any public comment at this time? If you do, please approach the dais, state your name for the record. That was a good dancing thing you had going over there.
I've always been a good dancer. Donna Westfall, 1st District. I'm wondering if there is an industry of wrecking families for profit in our town. Yesterday, the jury in the Brian Ranger sex abuse case returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. During the trial, 21-year-old Mercy Ranger admitted under oath to having had a sexual relationship with the landlord's son, Marcus Nash. Mercy was 14 years old when the relationship started. Marcus was over 40. Their relationship lasted 2 years. Marcus was never charged with statutory rape. I'm wondering why. Apparently, our sheriff's office has known about this since 2014. On the stand, Del Norte County Deputy Clarkson was asked if he would call that an affair, and his response was, quote, "I call that a crime," end quote. All the children were put into foster care and adopted out in 2013 when Judge Follett terminated Brian Judy's parental rights. On Saturday, June 24th, Mercy's 17-year-old brother was kicked out of the house by his adoptive mother Debbie Magana Parsons. She receives income every month for taking care of him. Why would she kick him out? Is it because he recanted on the stand and said he lied about his dad because Mercy bribed him to? Or is it because she recently lost her job and her license for foster care due to allegations of abusing her adoptive son? Or is it because she lost her job as a drug and alcohol counselor because she abused drugs and alcohol and had to go to rehab at Serenity Lanes last month? Will she continue to receive income even though the young man is no longer living in her home and does not want to return? Yet he suffers with an impacted tooth and pain that no one seems to care about or whether or not it ever gets treated. Will charges of abuse and neglect be leveled against her? Next, I'd like to turn my attention to the public defender, William Cater, who, in my opinion, did a woefully inadequate job of defending his client, Brian Rager. Between Cater and private investigator Charles Rafferty, thousands and thousands of dollars from this county were paid out to provide an inadequate defense. I wouldn't be surprised if it reached $100,000. Witnesses for the defense were interviewed minutes before being put on the stand and complained they were not allowed to bring forth pertinent information to aid in Brian's defense, like the attempted blackmail. While Brian Ranger continues to sit in jail waiting for sentencing, I'd like to know if this county has any intention of dealing with Marcus Nash. If not, why not? Who's protecting him? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, public comment. Good morning.
Hi, I'm Connie Morrison, and this is on the same subject. Ezra was at my house, and he said when he was a little boy, he lied. His older sister, Mercy, had talked him into lying about the father, and he feels the guilt of that and wondering if anybody's going to believe him. I just encouraged him to tell the truth and go ahead and speak. And I just said that to further substantiate that this is a big problem.
Thank you for your comments. Any further public comment at this time? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board and move to item 2, which is our 10:30 timed agenda item and presentation from the Del Norte Economic Development Corporation. Is this going to be a PowerPoint? Or?
Yeah, there is
Okay,
a PowerPoint
very
with
good.
this.
Thank you.
I guess
There we go. We've got it.
it's hiding. Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Good morning. Doing terrific.
Good, good, good. I know we're short on time today, so I'll go through this as quickly as possible. But we are looking at the 7 best practices to create economic vitality. So the
And
first, go ahead.
Please introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm
for
so
those
sorry.
that-
I'm Roxanne Haynes. I'm the Executive Director for the Del Norte Economic Development Corporation.
Nice to meet you, Roxanne.
You too. So the question always comes up, what do we do at the EDC? What's our purpose? Our role in this community is to offer affordable small business loans to small business owners that cannot qualify through traditional forms of lending. We're meant to be as a stepping stone, so if an employer or somebody opening a business doesn't have 2 years of business experience, they can't qualify traditionally. So we like to go ahead and put them in that loan, and then after 2 years, we have them referred back to a bank to graduate into traditional financing, and thus putting those funds back into our bowl to be able to relend. This allows us to help keep jobs in the community and have startup businesses, retentions, and expansions. And you know what, I'm way off on this, sorry. So, but there's more to economic development than just giving out small business loans. It's a national thing. Today we're going to talk about the 7 best practices for creating a vital economy in Curry, Del Norte, Humboldt, Jackson, and Josephine counties, which are all the counties that we service. What we're focusing on is providing networking opportunities for community leaders, developing leaders within our community, and helping existing businesses stay in our county while also helping people open new ones. This 7 best practices was created by the Rural Development Initiative. They're based out of Eugene, Oregon. And we can start improvising or implementing a lot of these practices here. And some of them are actually starting to already be implemented by members of the community. Best practice number 1 is creating networks to support entrepreneurs and micro-business development. Our local economy is most successful when it's diversified, so we don't want to invest all of our resources and hopes into one large employer. Communities are most resilient when there are a lot of small and micro businesses, so if one or several businesses do not survive, there's still plenty of employment opportunities available. These businesses will continue to contribute to the local economy in contrast to the impact of one major employer closing. Successful communities identify and connect entrepreneurs to the resources, expertise, and financing to get started and growing, linking businesses together in a value chain that can help each of the enterprises be more resilient. So putting that into our community, we can see what happened when Ray's closed and Payless Shoes closed. All those people are out of business and out of jobs, and there wasn't really anything to pick up the slack on those. We need to build up an array of small businesses that showcase our area. Best practice number 2 is thinking local and supporting local businesses first. Our local businesses cannot survive if we do not support them. When you buy local, your money stays in the local economy longer. It circulates throughout your community by creating jobs and increasing incomes. A healthy community has a strong think local economy where people are not only buying locally but also investing in those local businesses as well. Community wealth and well-being are increased by local control and local ownership when you move your business from Wall Street to Main Street by investing in local businesses. So some of the examples of this practice that we see as Small Business Sunday, which is a national event trying to get people to go and shop local. SBA, the Small Business Administration, puts on a Small Business Week in which we are able to give ideas on new businesses, startups, lots of events that we can actually host here in our community. Best practice number 3 is retaining and growing local businesses. It's always easier and more cost-effective to retain a business already in your community than it is to recruit a new business from the outside. Utilizing an existing organization like a chamber or business association or starting a business assistance team is a good way to retain or expand local businesses and to create local jobs. A business retention and expansion program or business assistance team utilizes local volunteers to connect businesses to resources that can help in planning, marketing, financing, and other needs required for entrepreneurial success. So examples in our community of this practice is the SBDC and the South Coast Development Council, and of course our EDC here. Best practice number 5, implementing a downtown revitalization. This in Crescent City I think is super important. We kind of want to become a destination area where people come on vacation and see the beauty that's around us. But when you go downtown and you see the homeless people and the drug addicts all roaming around, it's really taking away from the businesses downtown. So we need to create a healthy and vibrant downtown that is going to boost economic health and quality of life. Specifically, a healthy downtown creates jobs, incubates small businesses, reduces sprawl, retains community heritage, and is a symbol of community pride. There are many approaches to downtown revitalization, including the Main Street approach, which was developed by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And the approaches are organization, promotion, design, and economic restructuring. Most rural Northwest communities expanded from a historic small downtown core. And in many towns, Main Street is still the heart and soul of the community. Many chambers, cities, and community development corporations do have a downtown revitalization project. We are currently looking for financing to help in that endeavor and working with we'd like to shout out to the Downtown Divas who have kind of taken the spear on that and trying to get downtown to be a destination place where people would like to go and feel safe taking their families. Best practice number 6, organizing farmers markets and community-supported agriculture. Farmers markets provide residents with fresh local produce as opposed to many of the products that we get from our local grocery stores, Walmart, Ray's, or Fred Meyer, or Safeway. Farmers markets help us to focus on seasonal eating. Many farmers markets have become large community events where families can come out and eat from a vendor, food booths, listen to live entertainment, all of which will help to build the social capital. Farmers markets and food festivals are a great way to showcase a community's agriculture as well as the food that it's known for. These types of events bring in dollars from those living in the community as well as tourist dollars. Continuing with this practice, another way to get products directly from your local farmers is through community-supported agriculture. Over the last 20 years, CSA has become a popular way for consumers to buy local, fresh, seasonal food. Though a CSA, a farmer typically offers a certain number of shares to the public, so we're talking about a food co-op. And I have been in contact with the food co-op down in Eureka about maybe coming up and expanding into one of these areas. Interested consumers purchase a share, aka a membership. In return, they receive a box of seasonal produce delivered each week through the farming season. Community-supported fisheries are starting to expand and are available in more areas, and many ranchers offer shares in beef, lamb, and other meat products. If you have a farmer's market, CSA, or an opportunity to buy from local ranchers and seafood companies in your area, that's a great way to contribute to your community. And the final best practice, number 7, is developing visitor amenities. And we're talking rural and geotourism. The travel industry is a significant contributor to our rural local communities, especially here where we are at. And based on the data from Travel Oregon and research by Dean Runin and Associates, tourism employs the most number of people and ranks 4th for the level of earnings in Oregon. I'm sure that number is comparable in our area here in Del Norte. It brings in twice as much income in our state's rural areas as compared with urban areas. Many of the tourism businesses are sole proprietors, so this builds a strong case that the tourist industry supports our local entrepreneurs. Geotourism sustains or enhances geographic character of place, its environment, heritage, and the well-being of its residents. Rural tourism promotes responsible travel by providing visitor services, attractions that generate local revenue, while preserving our local heritage and natural amenities. So I want to take a quick minute and show you how some of these practices have been developed and the success that they have become. So here we see some examples. I don't know how well you can see it up there, but the Oyster Festival in Arcata, you can see the number of tourists that come up for that. The second picture is in Mount Shasta. If any of you have been to Mount Shasta, you know it's a very small town, but the annual Christmas tree event that they do each year brings in lots of tourism. Farmers markets, this one happened to be downtown Minneapolis. They make it a big event, so they actually close down several city blocks, and they have all of the farmers market stuff, but they also have vendors selling other things, and they have music, and it's a big event, so people will drive several miles just to get there. More examples, is anyone familiar with Manitou Springs in Colorado? This is an example of what they've done by revitalizing the downtown area. It used to be filled with a lot of criminals, shall we say? And they took that away from them, and they rebuilt and kept the heritage and kept the traditional little town looking, but they have all these great little shops and restaurants in there, and it generates a lot of money for their area. Another example is downtown Santa Fe. They've managed to have the square just be their downtown area, and that's where everybody goes in tourism, and they have all sorts of sales and restaurants and businesses and touristy things, and they've been able to maintain that Santa Fe, New Mexico look. So in conclusion, the influence of the 7 practices on the Del Norte economic development. Our success working with the communities and regions can be directly linked to the 7 best practices created by the nonprofit organization Rural Development Initiatives. The 7 best practices are an integral part of our business model now. We are here to serve and maintain existing businesses as well as help open new businesses. We have potential clients coming in daily with great business ideas, but they aren't sure where to begin or what to do to get their ideas off the ground. And we are a resource not just for lending funds, but to connect people to partners that could assist on making their dreams a reality. And we are partnered with the SBDC, so they are a great resource for both for us and other clients, because if they're not quite there yet with their business plan, we refer them to the SBDC. They do some work with it, polish it up, and then they're ready to be lended to and open their business. So that's all I have today. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Roxanne, for a great presentation. Questions, comments from supervisors?
I just want to say thanks for the presentation. It's good to see that we are implementing a lot of those right now, currently, and hopefully we can just grow in those. We do the farmers market, we have Downtown Live, we have big events, one coming up, we're bringing a lot of tourists next week.
4th of July.
So it's good to know that we are already implementing quite a few of those.
And we can keep going and keep growing by following these.
Great. Supervisor Gitlin, please.
Thank you, Roxanne. We've met before, and it's an issue that kind of perks my interest is what role do you see your agency playing in addressing the critical shortage of housing, affordable housing in our
Actually,
community?
I serve on several committees that we are looking into the problem. We've been focused really on Curry County, but I do know that it's a huge problem in Del Norte County. I also know that we have a gentleman that's come in, and he is looking to do a lot of low-income housing. So I'm waiting for him to get paperwork back to me and everything so we can look at partnering up with another EDC to make sure that we have the funds available to help him do that.
Yeah, and that would be the converting of the mobile home parks we spoke about before, the Shangri-La, which has changed its image and is looking to expand and provide that low housing component. Could you give us some examples locally of your projects that have, I know you showed us a lot of things across the country. Anything that you're particularly proud of or what's in the mix right now?
I'm sorry.
Visitor amenities, I'm looking at number 7, and whatever those goals are, whatever those items were, can give us some good examples of local projects.
We were the funders for Port-au-Prince locally here. We have funded Zola's Pizza up in Brookings. We've done some work with Trees of Mystery. Good Harvest was one of our clients. I think off the top of my head. I have some other loans in process, but since they're not closed yet, I can't talk about them publicly. But we do have a lot of projects that we're looking at trying to get involved with, including the expansion of the Port Orford Medical Clinic and trying to get a 3D mammogram machine into Curry Health up in Brookings. That's going to benefit everybody up there having that. And we have some other projects that I can't quite go to yet.
We'll ask you later.
Off the record.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisors.
I
Supervisor Berkowitz.
just want to thank you. Sometimes it's difficult to focus on what factors bring businesses into our community, and focusing on these 7 best practices basically lets people know just exactly what it takes and what's important.
Yep. And we're asking that, the city and county help out. One of the major complaints that we get from people trying to bring a business into the area is the difficulty they have getting the permits, getting everything, and that there was some way to streamline it so that they could get a piece of paper and go, I need this, 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 and this, and have that go smoothly. That would definitely help to bring new businesses in.
Thank you. Supervisor Hemmings? Great.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything. Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Roxanne.
Yeah, appreciate your time. Any public comment on the presentation? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Thank you again, Roxanne, for your presentation. We're going to go ahead and move to our 10:40 timed agenda item, which is juvenile hall status and 12-hour program presentation by Chief Lonnie Raymond. Chief?
Morning. So, what I'm going to be talking about is based on the proposal program description that I've provided to the board previously and as part of the agenda item today. What I'll be talking about is the origins of the 12-hour program, how we came about designing the program and the reasons why, what the current status of our juvenile hall staffing is, as well as what the nuts and bolts of the program are. I know you have a packed agenda today, so I'll try and move fairly quickly and leave you opportunity for questions as well. So to set the stage for today, this is informational only. I'm not asking the board to take any action, but what I am preparing for is an agreement between us and Humboldt County probation to house youth in their juvenile hall, a portion of our youth, not all of them. And I foresee that coming within the next month, probably. It's currently being worked on between us, County Council, Humboldt County as well. So, the origins of the 12-hour program. Recruiting and retaining staff has always been a challenge. It's been a challenge for the county. In particular, it's been a challenge for law enforcement agencies in the county. It's something that's a common discussion item at our administrators' meetings that we have every month. It's not limited to county. It's also a problem faced by the city and even Pelican Bay as well. To the sheriff's chagrin, at times he's had Pelican Bay employees coming in and handing out business cards at the jail to try and recruit staff, because it's that difficult to recruit and retain good staff that want to be in the county, that want to do the job. So that's a challenge that's faced by all of us. Juvenile hall probation's no exception to that. And to give you a little context, minimum staffing at our juvenile hall to operate a 24-hour facility is 11. I need 11 staff to run my juvenile hall. Positions that we have on paper are 14 juvenile corrections officers, and that includes both supervisors and line staff. Details regarding that are on page 1 of the report. On page 2, you can see some of the steps that we've taken to bridge the gaps when we've had staffing that's less than that. One of the big things that we've done that's impacted the department across the board is to roll probation officers in to fill those gaps. We started doing that intermittently back in 2015. As we got new recruits and filled some of those positions, we'd pull POs back to be able to do their day jobs. If we lost people, we'd roll POs back in, and so we had this rise and fall across the board. September of last year, we got to the point where it was basically no one could plan on what they were doing. The POs were either being pulled one way or the other. They never knew if next month this would change, they'd be back in the hall or not, so we instituted a schedule, a rotating schedule, that had a minimum of 3 POs worked into the juvenile hall schedule during any week. That also, on top of that, it included my assistant chief filling a shift. She acted as a supervisor for one of the shifts, and she's been doing so for about 10 months now, since September. One of the issues that we have when we roll POs in to fill those holes in juvenile hall is the training that probation officers get is not the same as the training juvenile corrections officers get. When the state looks at training and regulatory requirements, my POs do not meet the requirements that BSCC has for supervising juveniles in custody. So although we can work with them out on the street, we can arrest them, we can get them to programming, we can do all sorts of things when it comes to being in custody, my POs don't count in the ward to staff ratio. They basically act as another body, just like a new recruit that we've just brought in that has a very minimal level of training. So they aren't allowed to supervise youth one-on-one. There always has to be a juvenile corrections officer, core trained staff with them in order to meet that requirement from the state. So that's been an issue that we've struggled with as we've rolled POs in to a regular schedule. Staff burnout's become a major issue. Because we struggle with low staffing on the hall side, and because we've rolled probation officers in to fill those holes, there's really no coverage. If somebody calls in sick, if somebody needs vacation time, if somebody needs to take some time off, what we're doing is we're pulling from the probation side if we have somebody to pull to fill those holes, and that creates a difficult situation. It also limits time off. I have several staff that are topped out. They aren't accruing any vacation time because they haven't been able to take that time off and get those hours down. They're losing that at this point. And that's happening both on the juvenile hall side and the probation division side as well. And lastly, the impact on my probation division, those POs that are rolled in are being pulled in two different directions. They're working either full shifts in juvenile hall or partial shifts to cover a certain span of hours during a day, but then they're going back to the office either for part days or after a couple weeks and trying to pick up where they left off with supervising caseloads, whether that be adults, whether that be juveniles, whether that be writing reports and getting things that the court needs. So they're being stretched in a couple different directions as well, so that's put a great strain on people. So we face two problems. One is recruitment. Like I said, that's an issue that's faced across the county and by us as well. We've continued to do a lot of the same things that we have been doing. We've run 4 to 5 recruitments on average every year. So every 3 months at least, we've been starting a new recruitment cycle where the positions are advertised, where we wait that period of time for them to be advertised and for applications to come in, processing those applications, testing individuals, doing a series of interviews, doing backgrounds, doing psychs, doing medicals, and trying to recruit to fill those positions. So that's never ceased, and it's continuing to this day. Human resources in the county, headed by administration, have been a great help. They've gone through their own trials through the last several years, but they have a new manager on board, and that's helped to streamline things. She's doing a great job communicating, and we're working out some of those kinks that have happened previously. So HR has been a great resource and help in the recruitment side. Training is a significant component of trying to bring new staff on board as well. And what we look at is a fairly significant cost money-wise in training up and recruiting new employees, hence the reason we want to retain as many as we can. We look at a minimum of 6 weeks of training during the first year that a JCO comes on board. 5 of those weeks are out of town. The training that's required isn't offered here. And you can see this on page 7. There's a breakdown of some of the things that we spend money on and what we do. About a week of that training we try and do in-house. That's not necessarily accounting for orientation. We have a week-long orientation when a staff member comes on board to begin with. Various other county requirements for training as well. So that's something that we have to take into consideration when we're looking at staffing, particularly with 5 weeks out of town. We don't have somebody to be filling those shifts. And the expectation is we'll lose that person for at least 5 weeks during that first year where they won't be working because there'll be a training. Another consideration that we look at when we're recruiting is this is not law enforcement light. The juvenile hall is a high liability institution for this county. We're dealing with a correctional facility, very similar to the jail, Pelican Bay. We're incarcerating people. They happen to be typically under the age of 18, which I would argue creates a higher liability in many senses than does incarcerating an adult. These JCOs have a high level of responsibility to take care of the youth entrusted to their care and custody. In the last 3 years, we've dealt with everything from an alleged murderer in custody, a rapist, kidnappers, carjackers, youth who have created and worked to enact plans to assault my staff and kill my staff to escape. We've dealt with youth that are so highly intoxicated that we cannot book them into custody for several hours because they're so out of control, to the point where they don't recognize that they've poured out their glass of water that's been provided, have urinated in the cup, and then drink it. So these are issues that my JCOs have to deal with on a daily basis. This is not babysitting. And the requirements of this job and the demands of this job, particularly when we have low staffing, and much is expected of my staff, is very difficult. So to think that somebody can just be pulled in off the street, that we can relax our recruiting standards, is not in any way, shape, or form something I am willing to consider. So that leads us to the second problem I've touched on, is retention. Staff that we've had have left for a variety of reasons. Money always comes up. We are one of the lowest, if not the lowest paid county as a whole, but juvenile hall and probation department in the state. Sometimes that's an issue. The last several folks that have left us, that really hasn't been an issue. It's been more personal life. Life continues on even when you're an employee of the county. And so the challenges that people deal with on a daily basis lead to hard decisions for them, and sometimes they separate employment. Sometimes they leave for career opportunities in other places, whether that be here in the county or taking them out of the state or a different part of the state, and that's happened before as well. Part of retention, burnout issues, like I've talked about, is a significant issue. When folks are stretched thin, they start looking for other possibilities and other alternatives. And that leads to retention issues as well. It creates an unstable environment in our hall. You have rotating people in and out. Shifts, teams aren't stable because we're trying to fill those holes with whoever's available. It also creates an issue when we're trying to bring new staff on board. We're thin in experience in JCOs and supervisors, and so there's not that ability for a supervisor to take the time to train a new staff person or to walk with them through a certain activity or event to be able to show them how best to handle that. And so we end up with an environment that's challenging for new staff as well. The 12-hour program is specifically meant to address the retention issue. While I recognize that recruitment is necessary, I've always recognized that recruitment is necessary. While we do things to address that, to find people, we have to do something to address our retention issue as well. We can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. So real quickly, I'll run down a timeline of events. I got to the point where I reached that conclusion specifically, that we cannot continue to do the same thing and expect different results, at the very end of last year, beginning of January. On January 5th, I instituted a series of meetings with my management staff and my supervisory staff at the hall to try and come up with some solutions, look at what the different possibilities were for us to deal with this, and how best to manage the retention issue and hopefully get some relief for my staff. At that time, I had 7 JCOs working for us. So page 3 to 9 in the report describes some of the possible solutions that we discussed. I'm not going to go through all of those, but we looked at a series of different things and considered what the implications would be for the juvenile hall and for the county. What we ended up at was a 12-hour program would be the best solution to offer some relief to our staff, to retain new staff, to continue operations as best we could. On the 27th of January, I completed the report that's before you. I passed that, distributed it out to a number of people, to you as a board, to county administration, the courts, Juvenile Justice Commission, and started having discussions with people regarding the 12-hour. Our goal at that point was to try and implement in the middle of February. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. We continued to develop protocols and procedures for how this would look and how we would operate and do business if the 12-hour were implemented throughout February. Continued to have those conversations with different stakeholders and people involved. On March 13th, I had a conversation with the juvenile court judge, basically to the effect that one of the things I was requesting from him was a standing order to be able to house some youth in Humboldt County. His response to that was that he was willing to sign the order, but he wasn't in support of the program. In that conversation, one of the conclusions we reached was that there were a lot of conversations happening in separate places with separate people, and it would probably be best to try and get everybody on the same page by having a stakeholder meeting. So on the 13th of March, I started the process of trying to convene such a meeting. Because of different scheduling issues, that did not happen until May 2nd. At that point, we had a stakeholder meeting that was sparsely attended. Had a conversation about where we were at, what the 12-hour was, the reasons behind it, much like we're doing today. And after that meeting on the 15th, I sent a request to my juvenile court judge requesting that he sign a standing order to allow us to proceed working on the contract that we would need with Humboldt County. I received a reply from him on the 19th of May stating that if you as a board were to approve such a contract, he would be willing to sign a standing order to allow us to house youth in Humboldt County. So on the 22nd of May, had a follow-up meeting with County Council, who's been working on this since the beginning of the year, and they've started the process to pick up that agreement and move it forward, which leads us to today in this conversation in preparation for what I hope to be in the next 2 to 4 weeks, such a contract to come before you for a vote to allow us to house some of our youth who are not appropriate for the 12-hour program in Humboldt County. So what my current status is, given all that in the timeline, I've gone from 7 employees to 5. I currently have 2 supervising JCOs and 3 line staff in my hall. We've increased the number of probation officers that are working in the hall. At any given time, I've got about 3 working permanently, a 2-week, well, everyone is working. I misspoke. I've gone from 3 to about 5 now. Everyone, for the most part, is working a 2-week cycle where they work 2 weeks in juvenile hall, 2 weeks back in probation. My assistant chief has continued to fill a supervisor's role. My adult services unit supervisor from probation is working a night shift to round out that side of the week. Staff are tired and they're looking for solutions and alternatives. We have nothing better at this point. We've come up with no better idea than the 12-hour program. We've also continued to recruit. We've got 4 people in the pipeline. I had hoped for a 5th, but that didn't turn out today, as can be seen by the item that was pulled from the agenda. But 3 of those 4, I believe, went for psychs last week and this week, so we should have answers back within the next week or so on when we can onboard those folks if they pass their psychological examination. So that's the current status. I'll give you a brief rundown on what the 12-hour is. It's specifically meant to address the retention issue. That's what it's about. It doesn't touch the recruitment side, I understand that, and we're going to continue to recruit. The 12-hour is an imperfect solution. I'm not going to argue with anyone. It is not rainbows and Skittles falling from the sky. This is a hard situation, and unfortunately, this is the best solution that we've got. The foundational principles that we approached when we were discussing this and trying to create it were to utilize the resources we have, primarily the number of staff that we have, maintain hall operations as best that we can and as seamlessly as we can, and provide for community safety as best we can. So to address those three things, utilizing the resources we have, at the time we had 7, now we have 5, covering 2 shifts rather than 4 shifts is a whole lot easier with the number of staff that we have. It would allow us to roll probation officers, for the most part, out of the schedule and allow them to do the job they signed on for. It would bring some relief and better staffing to the 2 shifts that we would run. What that would look like is we would, well, I'll get into that in just a second. I have a couple more points. Supervisory staff, as I said, they'd have more freedom and opportunity to work with new staff, given the fact that we're only working 2 shifts and you have supervisors on both shifts with more staff. They'd be able to take those new staff and teach them the job and give them the attention that they need, so that they aren't hanging out there by themselves trying to figure out how to do this while everyone's running around with a chicken like their head's cut off, just trying to make things run. It also allows for some time off. It allows us to give people vacation. It allows the opportunity for somebody to call in sick when they're actually sick instead of showing up because they know there's no one to cover. So it allows some relief for my staff. Maintaining operations as seamlessly as possible, what that would look like is we would run 12-hour days, basically from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. We would have youth that are screened as appropriate for a 12-hour program, transported by staff into the hall, processed in the hall. They'd attend school like we normally do. They'd eat food from the kitchen like we normally do. They receive mental health, alcohol, and other drug services, Remy Vista services, like we normally do. They'd have medical, like we normally do, large muscle exercise, programming provided by staff. So for the most part, the program as we run the hall today during the day shift would remain intact. What would be different is at the end of the day, these kids would be strapped on GPS, taken home, and dropped off at their house. And they would be expected to stay at home, barring some unforeseen circumstance or some scheduled activity with their family, until we come and pick them up in the morning. This allows us to meet our state statutory guidelines. It gets us back to where we have JCOs running the juvenile hall instead of POs who don't have the training and aren't allowed to supervise these kids. It puts the staff that we have for the hall on those shifts. It allows us also, like I said, to bring these new hires in and provide them the opportunity to be trained and oriented like they should be. And providing for community safety as best we can. Not every youth that we have in custody, some of them I've already described to you, are appropriate for this program. Just not the case. And so there are some that will require 24-hour custody. If we run the 12-hour, we can't provide that. And so what we would look to do is partner with Humboldt County, who's been very gracious in what they've proposed as a contract cost with us, to house those youth in Humboldt County. That would both be pre-disposition, post-disposition. We would be looking at doing transports for court, things like that, and that's been considered as part of this. And this is where the board comes in. To accomplish that, to set that up, so when we screen these youth and determine that, yes, you're appropriate for 12-hour, no, you're not appropriate for 12-hour, you need to be incarcerated 24/7. That agreement that's going to come before you as a board is critical to making this happen. If it doesn't, frankly, I don't know what we'll do. So again, not without the challenges. We have transports to deal with. We have middle of the night arrests. You know, crime doesn't necessarily happen between 8 and 5 during the day. Oftentimes the radio lights up on Fridays at 4:30 and everything goes to hell in a handbasket, or middle of the night. So we've made allowances in our procedures and protocols to deal with that, to screen the youth when they come into custody, and to either strap them up and place them on the 12-hour, so they're picked up first thing in the morning and transported to juvenile hall, or they're transported down to Humboldt County. And again, we'll continue our recruiting efforts because this problem isn't solved until we have the bodies in place to deal with it. So the 12-hour offers us that opportunity to deal with our retention issues, to create an environment where people can come on board and get trained without being driven into the ground. So to sum it all up, my supervisory staff, myself, my management team, we believe that this is the best alternative on the table. We understand it's not a good one, but it's the best we have. It provides us the best path for retaining our staff, relieving the burnout issues that we're facing, and allowing the opportunity for the hall to get to a stable place where we can reopen as a 24-hour facility. So that's what I have, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Lonnie, I'm sure the board has got a lot of questions. To say the least, this is a mess, and I think you know that. I do want to compliment you and your staff for presenting a fairly good discussion today, and then also a great paper about those alternatives we face. There was a lot of thought put into that in helping to spell out those potential options and the cost of those options to the board. I think it will weigh heavily today into the comments that we see. The first question I have, and then I'll go ahead and open up for questions to the board. I will have more. On a 12-hour program, I know we're mandated to have a certain level of staffing for juvenile hall. Under the 12-hour program, does that still remain at 11?
It does. Well, what the ward to staff ratio is during the daytime hours when kids are awake, it's 1 to 10. During the nighttime hours, it's 1 to 15, and those are regulations passed down by the state. Supervisors don't count to the ward to staff ratio.
Okay.
So typically, graveyard shifts, we've run 2 for a long time, a supervisor and a line staff. What that leaves us with is a maximum of 15 in custody. During the daytime hours, again, if you're running 1 supervisor and 2 line staff, we could run 20.
Sure.
The challenge this presents is when you've got kids in the facility doing different things. For instance, we've had kids that can't manage school for a day. So that youth has to be removed from the classroom, taken back to the unit. They have to have a staff person with them in the unit when they're in the room. Sometimes we're able to do alternative learning, tutors, things like that. But if they're locked down because of behavior issues, now those 2 staff that might give me the possibility to supervise 20 are now in 2 different places. One's just watching 1 kid. The other one has to watch everybody else. If everybody else turned out to be 19 youth, that's not a safe environment for my staff. So what we've done at Juvenile Hall, given the staffing that we normally run, is we try and cap it at 10. Our average daily population over the last 3 years has been 7 to 8.
7 to 8.
Right now, I didn't check this morning, but we have been running at 10. Some of those are pre, some of those are post-dispo, serving some of their sentences.
So just a quick follow-up then. So you've got the 2 levels of youth, one that could potentially go under a 12-hour program, one that for certain, if a program is utilized in Humboldt County, would go under permanent retention.
Right.
In the discussion, you obviously negotiated or had some discussion with Humboldt County. Have they gave you the 125 or the 124,000 annual piece?
They
and
did.
that accounts for how many kids?
We figured it would be, if you split our average population in half, you're looking at 4. We're guessing at this point, and every day it varies. When we were doing this process in January, I had my staff taking the screening tool that we're looking at utilizing, and screen the kids we had in custody. Some days it came out, out of the 8 kids that we had, 5 or 6 of them would be in 12 hours. Some days it came out where 2 of them would be in 12 hours.
What's generally the duration that a youth is in custody?
Length of stay?
Yeah.
It varies. We're looking at, I want to say somewhere between 85 and 100 days.
Okay.
If you averaged it out.
Very good. And your overall impact to the general fund budget?
Given the vacancies that we've had, plus the overtime that we've used trying to fill those, it comes out to about breaking even.
So,
but again,
figure?
That was projections back in January. So coming into a new fiscal year, again, we're still looking at vacancies. I might be able to fill 4 of those if all the stars align here pretty quickly. As we progress and hire staff, the budget impact is going to be greater because we're actually utilizing those funds that are vacancies right now to pay for staff that are coming on board while we're still paying for youth in Humboldt County.
So since I don't have it in front of me, what are you proposing this year in your 17-18?
This 17-18, it would likely be around the same cost. Well, it would be the same cost for Humboldt County, $125,000.
Your overall budget, sorry, my apologies. Your overall budget impact this coming fiscal year, 700, 800, 900? Jay, do you have that number off the top of your head? Okay. Maybe we could come back to that one. Thank you. All right. Supervisor Gitlin.
Lonnie, my heart goes out to you because I know it's a challenging position. But you see this as a temporary situation, this 12-hour dynamic. Yes. You see it as a temporary. So of the 10 right now, who currently, this is a ballpark estimate on your part, what, 4 go down to Humboldt and the other 6 go to their homes under a bracelet? Is that what you see?
Given the kids we've got right now, I'd probably say it's safer to say 6 or 7 would be in 24-hour custody for the moment.
Which challenges the budget even more.
Yes.
So what kind of a time frame are we talking about as a projected temporary program? Because you're mandated to have a juvenile hall or have a JPA agreement by state with another juvenile hall. So that component with Humboldt County has to have their buy-in. So what are we talking about, a year here?
12 to 18 months. Given what I've seen in looking back at our recruitment, how many people we've gotten, we'll do a recruitment, get 30 applicants. By the time all's said and done, I might be looking at making offers to 3 or 4 of them. Trying to retain those has been the issue. So recruiting takes time. Finding the right people takes time. And I wouldn't foresee us getting to the point where we have staff, enough staff and trained staff, 11, before 12 to 18 months.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Lonnie. Thanks for that report. I just have a couple questions. Well, actually, I have a lot of questions. Who's going to do the transport? Have you guys worked that out?
It would be either probation or JCOs. It would depend on the day and who's working and what staffing we have.
And you think you have enough staff to do that?
We would make it work, yes.
And
we don't have
you
choice.
wouldn't be relying on the Sheriff's Department at all?
No, the sheriffs will not be doing transports for us.
I'm kind of confused about how the judge feels. So he's told you that he's okay and will sign off on this?
That's what he's indicated to me, yes.
Okay. What is the family situation when you're doing your, I forgot what you called it, but when you're figuring out who can go, who can't? You had some type of a scale or some,
right.
How does a family play into that? I don't want to be sending them home. My experience is these kids are in the hall for a reason because the situation at home is not good.
Right.
So sending them home for the night to me just seems ludicrous. So how does that play into it?
Family environment is going to have to be, it's one of those factors that's considered in the screening process. So that screening tool that we're using doesn't just look at the youth or the crimes they've committed or their history, but it also looks at the family support.
Okay, and then you answered...
Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Some have supportive environments that they're coming from, or at least not antagonistic environments. Some families would be willing to work with us. willing to have the kids at home, do what they can, some more with more ability than others to keep them at home. Some families, like you said, would just, those home environments would not be appropriate for the youth, no matter how that youth scores out.
Okay. And then you answer the question that you have about 6 to 8 kids average, daily average has been your daily average for the past 3 years.
7 to 8 has been
7
our
to 8,
ADP,
okay.
yeah.
This came up somewhere else, and you didn't really address it, but well, you have. You've said you're having a hard time retaining or recruiting. So my question is, once you've hired them, why are they leaving or being released? How many have been released in that first, I don't know what your probation time is.
Right.
Is that
It's
a
a
year? Is
year,
it 6
yes.
months?
Yeah, it's a
How
year.
many in the past couple of years have been released? And why are those reasons? If they've gone through HR, through you, through training, what is happening that you're not keeping them on?
It varies depending on the individual. The most recent, I have high expectations both for how somebody does their job and the attitude and character with which they do their job. Not everyone is willing to meet those requirements. I can't speak in an open forum regarding some of those issues. We've had, there was a period of time 2 years ago, it was probably 2016 or 2015, early 2016, where we were utilizing a, what was the word we used? Basically what we did is, instead of running somebody through the entire hiring process, what we'd do is we'd run fingerprints and we'd get a completed background application from them. So we wouldn't complete any other steps before we brought them on to start their orientation and start working. Provisional was the term we used. So typically what we do is we offer a conditional offer and go through all the steps, and once all that's done, we bring them on board. With the provisional, it was meant to try and get people on board more quickly so we could relieve some of those issues. That turned around and bit us in the butt. Several people, even though fingerprints came back clean, they gave us the background application. Once we started that process, we started looking at their character, who they hung out with, what kind of activity they involved themselves with, their psychs, a number.
Did you bring them on before you did their psychs?
Yes. And like I said, came back and bit us in the butt. So we had to let a number of those go for a variety of reasons, whether something came up in backgrounds as we completed them, or whether we saw issues while they were working.
So is it personality issues?
No, I'd say in some cases it was, most cases, behavior issues and performance issues.
So the 5-week training, 6-week training, 5 out, 1 in, does that start immediately, or does it start 6 months into this probation? When does that start?
Part of it depends on when the classes are offered. So JCO Core, again, it's not offered locally.
Gotcha.
A lot of the ones we send to, they go out to Sacramento. We've sent some to Yuba. I think we've sent some down to Santa Rosa area. So it depends on which schools are offering those trainings at the time. And so trying to schedule those out within that first year is what we're looking at.
So they could be there for a year before they get training? They could be there
As a PO, I was working for 14 months before I went to Core.
But what are we doing with our juveniles? What are we doing in juvenile hall? Are they getting training within that first 6 months? Or are they getting it within the first year?
First year is our requirement from the state. And we've been meeting that. Some have gone to training soon after they've been hired because of scheduling again, or other factors that we're looking at. Some have been sent later on during that year.
Do you find that maybe the ones who aren't getting the training are the ones being let go because they aren't getting proper training, so they don't know how to behave or do their job?
I wouldn't say so. I don't see a distinction between...
You don't think the training is helpful?
It absolutely is.
Okay, so I would
one
think
of the things that I see in STC training is it's very generic. because they're dealing with so many counties, and at least on the probation side. Again, I've never been through JCO Corps. You put me on the floor at Juvenile Hall as Chief Probation Officer, I'm not allowed to supervise youth by myself. But because these schools are dealing with so many different counties, they provide basic training that's mandated by law, and they provide generic training as far as how you interact with the youth or how you handle a specific situation. When folks come back, or in our case, every case really, when they're working for a period of time and then go, they have to mesh those two, the training requirements, the book learning, and the actual day-to-day operating realities of what juvenile hall is. Our staff, like I said, they go through a 40-hour orientation when they first come on board. So they walk through all our policies and procedures. They review those. They basically shadow. They're not worked into a schedule as an officer until they've completed that week where they're following. And then a lot of it's on-the-job training.
Okay, and you're saying, so what they're learning and what they need to do at our juvenile hall is different from what the state's training them to do?
In some respects, not completely by any means. Because again, a lot of it's state mandated training, and so that's going to be the same wherever you go. Those state regulations and requirements don't change. If you go from our juvenile hall to Shasta County Juvenile Hall to Mendocino County Juvenile Hall to Humboldt County Juvenile Hall.
What would be different here from what they're learning?
Day-to-day operations, who you're working with. It might be a schedule issue. It might be what type of large muscle exercise you're using. We're required to do programming with them, so how the programming manifests itself, what kind of curriculum you're using, how you go about interacting, whether it's groups, individuals, things like that. Expectations and policy vary from department to department.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Lonnie, for answering.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Very good. Let's go ahead and, Lonnie, got some other questions before we retire you, but would like to open up for public comment at this time.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. And I know Mr. Raymond's, Chief Probation Officer Raymond's schedule is tight. I'd like him to be around for the discussion on 25 and 26, which we didn't address on the consent agenda. He brought it up, and I'm hoping that your schedule allows you to stay here so we can ask those questions. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Supervisor. Public comment.
Good morning. Samantha Williams, Chapter President of the Delaware County Employees Association, SEIU 1021. There is part of the timeline that the chief did omit, and that was the involvement of the union. Since the changes to going from a 24 to a 12-hour program does actually impact the employees at the hall in regards to conditions of employment, which also would mean working environment. It is legally subject to a meet and confer under Myers-Milius-Brown 3500. On February 1st of this year, we received an official proposal from the chief regarding the 12-hour program. And also basically a draft of what he was looking at. In between, shortly after that, we did exchange emails and met with JCO and some of the probation staff regarding the 12-hour program. And then officially on February 16th of this year, we submitted a formal meet and confer request to meet with both the chief and the county to begin the process. During that time, shortly after that, we did meet with the chief and the county. We had one meeting. We then continued to exchange emails and meetings with the impacted JCOs. On February 27th, we then submitted another request to continue the meet and confer process. It was then on March 3rd, and then we were trying to, shortly after that, come up with dates in terms of scheduling. We were trying to do it around the actual union negotiations with the county, trying to see if we can get them all together at the same time. However, on March 13th of this year, we received notification from the chief that he would not be implementing the 12-hour program at the time, that if circumstances did change, he would want to pick up where we left off. It wasn't until May 30th that we received an update from the chief in regards to his conversation with the judge and in relation to the MOU with Humboldt County. And then he also then at that time said he wanted to pick up discussions again where we had left off and reiterating what was still left at the, on the table back in February. What we did then is that we have been in meetings with the JCOs. We still continue those meetings. There are right now a significant number of items that are all still left to be discussed. Items that do impact the employees and definitely have some concerns in relation to safety and security of staff, wards, in the community, and also concern in our willingness to minimize the liability and loss prevention for the county. Staff at this time does not have any objection to the 12-hour program, but there is some significant concern that it still is impacting the employees, and they're still trying to get together and finalize the union and staff's position before we then officially advise the county and the chief that we want to pick up the actual meet and confer process. But we do want to let you know that as much and as critical as this issue is, and I know that the chief wants to get this implemented as quickly as possible, it cannot be done until the meet and confer process is completed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Public comment. It is still morning, so good morning.
Always a good morning. Thank you. Paul Dillard, Juvenile Justice Commission. I didn't come here intent to address you today because it was supposed to be a presentation, listen and learn. I've listened, I've learned, I've heard things. The only thing I can really 100% agree with that Lonnie said, and he said a lot, you know, I'm not disagreeing with some of the things you said, but liability. This is the biggest liability of the county, the biggest. And we as juvenile justice are taking an oath to protect our kids. We look at that not only for today, but for 20 to 25 years from today. So we look at that serious. We have spent the better part of a year trying to glean out what's going on in juvenile hall. The reason I'm up this podium is I want you to know we have done a report. It will be coming to you. I'm making that a matter of public record right here, that there is a report overall about juvenile hall. I ask you to read it with an open mind. I ask you to ask questions, get a hold of me. I'll tell you where it's at. I ask you, once you read it, look at this presentation again, off your video. I think that would be important. There's a lot of stuff going on. This report would have been done, but there are people who have vacations, you know, so we have to have light.
Understood.
I will make the best effort to have this report to you right after the 4th of July. I was hoping to have it done before, but we'll have it to you in time that you can do your due diligence before your next meeting. I ask you not to make a decision. I don't think that's even up for today. Making a decision on the 12 hours, a travesty, and it's been, we caused it. We, county. We, me. We, every citizen in this county, we caused it. Now I ask you to look at the report. And I want you to know it's hard to get a consensus. I had no problem getting all members of the commission to endorse this report. One had to recuse himself because of conflict. But all of them endorsed this report. They'll all sign this report or it won't come forward. Okay? Or there'll be a comment why they didn't sign it. But I ask you to take this. I want you to know we have your back. You need to know that Juvenile Justice Commission is not only dedicated to the kids, it's dedicated to the liability of this county. And what's been going on is really bad. You remember I come in here at Bar O, you thought I was all crazy. Now you got a consent that 2 counties want to sign on contract. What happened with that? because we stuck up and rung the bell and fought for Barrow. We're fighting for juvenile hall. Please listen to what we have. There's not a biased commission member on that. It's all about this county and the well-being of our kids. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Public comment. Lonnie, go ahead and join us again if you could, please. I want to give the board the opportunity to ask some final questions. I know this is just a presentation today. We're not going to take any action. Looks like juvenile hall is about 1.6 million. Does that ring a bell?
Correct.
Okay. Curiosity question. If the board hypothetically said, we don't want to continue on with juvenile hall, we would just want to close the doors permanently, have a relationship with Humboldt County permanently. Have you thought about that scenario? I know you've kind of gone there in the report. I'd like you to discuss it briefly with us.
I have, and I would not be supportive of it, frankly.
Okay. And can you explain why?
I think there is a financial cost to running juvenile hall. No question about that. Running a hall is difficult. You ask any chief that is still running a hall, and not those who have recently shut theirs down, they'll tell you it's hard to recruit and retain staff everywhere else as well. However, I think the social cost to this county, being where we are, being the very northwestern tip of California, an hour and a half from the nearest custodial institution for youth, I think the social cost that we would incur as a community, that our kids would incur because they're removed on a permanent basis from the ability to be close to their families, to for purposes of re-entry, coming out of the hall, receiving services here, all those connections would be lost. And I think that we would pay the price for that in the long run if we were to just say we're not going to put up with it anymore. It's too much of a hassle. It's too hard to deal with. I think we need a juvenile hall here.
Yeah.
And I won't change.
I guess that's where us as policymakers and decision makers in this case try to balance the financial cost versus the social cost and what it does to those youth that we're trying to rehabilitate, right, for lack of a better term. I know we've got some difficult decisions again to make now on not the Barrow side, which Barrow is coming up soon, but on the juvenile hall side. And again, I do appreciate your time with the report. Any further comment from the board at this time? Okay. Lonnie, do you appreciate all the effort and your staff? Please thank them for us. We do anticipate something here in the near future. Hopefully County Council, along with your staff, will be able to come to some conclusions on the discussions that you're having.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. And Supervisor Gitlin requested, and understanding the nature of your time, Supervisor, can we take both these items, 25 and 26 simultaneously?
That's my hope too, Chairman. Okay. I pulled this from consent agenda because I kind of felt it was a moot point. We have this on the agenda. I'll read them to you. Approve and authorize the chair to sign the agreement for Barrow Boys Ranch placement with El Dorado County as requested by you. And the second one is the same verbiage with Amador County. I think we have there's four minors, 4 wards right now at the Barrow Ranch. One of them happens to be an El Dorado County resident. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
Correct.
So I'm wondering, in view of the fact that we have a drop-dead date of August 9th, whether this camp even remains open, why are we discussing this now? Rather, should we not wait to the second in the possibility that you'll somehow ascend from 4 to 16? Nothing is, I don't want to cut your feet off at your knees, but why are we discussing this now rather than the second meeting in August?
These have been established in open contracts. El Dorado has maintained a contract with us for many years. Essentially, they have an open contract. If they have a youth that's appropriate, they refer them, and they can place the youth. Amador County reached out to Mr. Burrow 3-4 months ago and indicated they might have several youth they would like to refer. They've had a contract with us in the past, and it's fairly standard practice for us. These are on 3-year cycles, if I recall correctly. If they come up for renewal, we put them before you for approval to get them renewed. Given the situation, even though we're looking at an August date, I didn't see, I don't know what's going to happen. And so I felt it the best decision to continue to put these before the board and ask for your approval for these contracts that we've had.
And I appreciate and have the confidence in you that you've made. This is a hard decision to make, and you can't predict the future. However, the writing appears to be rather dim. So I will make that motion at this time, Chairman, to approve items 25 and 26, lump them together,
Please.
authorizing you to chair the agreement for borrow grants for both El Dorado County placement and for Amador County.
Thank you, Supervisor. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
We have a second. Public comment, please. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board. Lonnie, I know this is important. The board has given you direction previously to go out there and make these efforts happen. This is a result of that. We'll continue on. Obviously, that date's coming quickly. Hopefully, we'll see some results. I know the public is anticipating that. Kylie, please pull the vote.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Chair Howard?
Yes. All right, we're going to go ahead with item number 35. I see our dear friends are here from the Border Coast Regional Airport Authority. Wow. Good morning. Got a smiley face this morning. I love it.
It's my turn.
It is your turn.
Yes, and I will make this fairly short. So, good morning. I'm Susan Doherty with the Border Coast Regional Airport Authority, here for our annual presentation to the board on our proposed budget for the 2017-18 year this time, as provided for and required by Article 4 in the Border Coast JPA agreement. So you have before you the 2017-18 budget. The budget this year is very similar to what we've had in past years when you're looking at the non-grant items. There are a few changes in this budget that I wanted to bring forward for you. In the payroll section, in payroll it accounts for my retirement from full-time employment in September and sets up a sum in part-time employment for my ongoing duties through the end of the year, where I will continue to work 16 to 20 hours a week. In the meantime, we have hired a replacement for both Heather Holt, who was part-time, and my eventual full-time replacement, Patricia Stanley, who's with us here today. And so a year from now, she'll be standing before you presenting this budget. So that was the change in payroll. In expenses and supplies, they're all pretty standard. We do have money in there for some required work to fuel tanks this year. There are also higher expenses than what we had budgeted previously in the city fire services. Those are for the required airport rescue and firefighting requirements for having the Penn Air carrier, and those charges are offset by higher charges to Penn Air in their upcoming agreement with us. So you'll see that in the income. Under other expenses, this is the first year of a payment on the Caltrans Aeronautics loan that we took out for matching funds on our one mitigation grant that we did not previously have matching funds for. So that's our first payment out to them. There is no payment budgeted or anticipated for a payment on the county loan on the terminal this year. If that changes, we will certainly be notifying you right away. So that is the non-grant portion of it. Pretty much the grant portion of the budget includes our continued work on for maintenance and monitoring at both Bay Meadows and the Pacific Shores mitigation sites. That goes on for a number of years in the future. So that's part of the AIP grant funds that you see in there. And then, of course, the terminal, parking lot, and apron construction is the large portion of that AFP funding that you see in the budget. The foundation was dug out and compacted and tested last week. Geotextiles being laid tomorrow, so we're excited to say the project is started. And then on the special aviation budget, it is basically, there's no Caltrans grants anticipated this year. We don't have any projects at Wardfield or Macbeth. It's the standard $10,000 per year annual grant from Caltrans Aeronautics that will oversee the maintenance of those fields. And so that's the report.
Thank you very much, Susan.
You're very
Questions
welcome.
from the board? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to open it up for public comment at this time. Okay, let's go ahead and bring it back to the board. Is there a motion on the table?
I'll move for approval.
Oh, second.
We have a motion and a second. Kylie, please pull the vote.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Chair Howard?
Yes. All right, item number 36 is a holdover from our last board meeting. We chose to put it on this board meeting, so we had an opportunity for members of the Yurok tribe to be present during this discussion, which is essentially to potentially sign and send a letter of support to Congressman Huffman's proposed Yurok tribe's land legislation, which I don't believe is in the form of legislation at this point, as requested by the Donner County Board of Supervisors.
Yes. And
Good morning.
Sorry about not being here last time. We were having trouble with our email server, and we weren't getting our emails for 2 or 3 days. So.
We know about technology.
Well, that's what the problem was, and but it's all straightened out now, and I am here, and we would definitely like a letter of support. Legislation is getting closer all the time. We have a lot more tribes coming on board, and we would definitely like a letter of support from you gentlemen.
When you
Ladies
say
and gentlemen.
tribes coming on board to support the legislation.
For the legislation, yes.
Okay.
All up and down the state.
Very good. I know the board probably has some questions for you, or maybe Amy. I see Amy is here in the audience with us today. Welcome back. I'd like to open up any discussions specific to the presentation that was given by the Yurok tribe a few board meetings ago. I know the board has had considerable debate and robust discussion around this. I know there's some concerns that I would like to share with the Yurok tribe today, and I know there's probably some concerns from the other board members, so let's go ahead and kick this off. Supervisor Hemmingson, why don't you get us started?
You know, for the most part, I'm having a hard time wrapping my arms around the benefits, either to the tribe or to the county. And the potential for the loss of tax revenue concerns me a lot, not just for me, but for my grandkids down the road. And I think, even though it's been stated that there was no intention of putting the land into trust, you know, I find that just difficult to get my arms around, because it seems to me like that would be the obvious thing that you would do. I would certainly do it if it was me. So my concerns are with that. I am really supportive of co-management, of any kind of co-management that you could do with the Forest Service or any other departments. I would be really in favor of that. The experimental forest portion, I don't have a lot of heartburn over that. I am disappointed in the Forest Service in being able, or at least the federal government, in being able to provide you money to fix up trails and bridges and roads like we talked about at the presentation, but not be able to provide that to the Forest Service. So that's a disappointment that I have in our federal government. Really doesn't have anything to do with the tribe, and so I'm not really against that portion of it, but expanding the reservation and not knowing what Humboldt County has weighed in on it. I talked to a supervisor yesterday, and he didn't think that they had weighed in on it at all. He said he could be wrong, but he was going to get back to me. But they have a lot more, seems to me like they have a lot more land involved in Humboldt County than we do in Delmar County. And I would hate to be supportive of something that was going to impact them.
Well, when it comes to the tax part of it, I can't speak for the future. I can only speak for the now. And as of right now, we're not planning on taking anything out of Delmar's pockets. When you want to talk about that, you guys just gave us some property down there that was, quite frankly, taken away from one of our tribal members back in the 40s by eminent domain. And now you guys are gracious enough to give it back to us, but you want us to pay taxes on it. That's kind of a low blow, in my opinion, having us pay taxes on something that we never had, nobody's paid taxes on, as far as I know. So, you know, that's kind of a two-way shot there. We pay a lot of taxes.
That wasn't anything I was aware of, Jack. I didn't know anything about it.
We pay a lot of taxes to Delmar County. I know, I sign the checks. And like I said, for our in and now right now, we're not planning on taking anything off the tax rolls. We want to get our legislation passed so that we can start getting on with our business of creating a better place for all of our people. And not only our people, but all the people on or around the reservation. We have some good plans to expand a herd of elk up into there, which will require us taking a lot of our prairies that the timber companies planted trees in that are no longer there, and replacing them, putting them back the way they were. As the timber companies come in, they thought they were doing a better thing for everybody, when all they did was mess things up a lot. And now we have a job ahead of us. It's not going to get done next week. It's not going to get done 10 years from now. We'll still be working on this 50 years from now. I won't even be around here. Probably none of you will be here. But it's still going to be something that's going to be going on. And the property is out of the tax market or not, I don't know. But we plan on doing things up there that will involve the public. We are already part of the land legislation states that there will be one of the groups that we're working with states that there will be a park in the Blue Creek drainage, and we're okay with that. We're okay with sharing it. We just don't want to get it all messed up like it already has been. So.
And, you know, and I'm not, you know, trying to get in a big debate, but I don't think there's anything in this that keeps you or precludes you from doing what you want to do. So that's just kind of my concern is all.
Well, we just want a letter of support from you guys saying that you don't mind it. Like I said, I can't speak for the future. All I can do is speak for the now.
Yeah, and that would be my only concern, would be the future. So since it can't be spoken to, then I have a hard time.
Well, you speak for the future of your grandkids, I speak for the future of mine.
Right, I agree. I absolutely agree.
Thank you. I want to do a quick recap, Councilman, and I'm not sure if this is best directed towards you or best directed towards Amy Cordalis, who I see is with us today. I wanted to recap quickly what the tribe is asking for in a letter of support, and then to really try to figure out best how to approach that in this discussion here today.
Go ahead.
Because obviously we're aware after having returned from Washington D.C. that there's currently not legislation out there, but there's potentially legislation coming.
Yes.
I'll turn it over.
Okay, that's probably a wise decision.
Thank you, Council Member. Thank you, Board of Supervisors, for allowing us to come back. If I may, I
Please.
first wanted to
offer a peace offering, a can of smoked salmon from my personal collection as an apology for not being here at the last meeting when this item was on your agenda, so I apologize. Now, a bit of cultural note, though, is if you accept this, you have to forgive us. So I hope you'll accept it.
I think the board is in consensus that you're forgiven.
You're forgiven.
I think he's on a weight loss program, so you better direct that towards Tyler. No?
Okay. Okay.
Very good.
All right, well, thank you. Should I address his concern or your question first?
If you can, let's back up and address the question specific to proposed or legislation that is in the work, and then we'll return to Jerry's comment.
Right. So the legislation was introduced in the last Congress, and, you know, per the legislative rules, you have to reintroduce the bill in the current Congress. And so in that process, we were asked by Congressman Huffman's office to come to you all and talk about you know, your concerns, your interests, how this might be beneficial to all of us, and if you were so amenable, sign a letter of support for the legislation. So there isn't a bill yet, but Huffman's office is still asking us to
Correct.
talk with you all about a letter of support.
And the components of that bill, as Jerry's kind of alluded to, one was the experimental forest, two was some co-management language, three was the idea of taking the current reservation boundary on the what would be the south and north sides of the river that is currently existing at a 1 mile and moving that to a 2 mile, is if I remember, or
well, yeah, expanding it further west,
Yes.
or east, excuse me, yes.
yes. And was there another component of that that I'm missing?
And then the final one is designating Bald Hills Road as a scenic
That's
byway.
correct.
And then that would make us eligible for grants under the Scenic Byway Act. And then we can help pave it, maintain it, that kind of thing.
Okay, so let's answer Supervisor Hemmingson, one of his first questions, specific to Humboldt County, since we're curious.
Oh, to Humboldt County.
Has the Yurok tribe at this point approached the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors for with a similar request?
We have approached them. We have not gotten as far down the process as we have with you all, because Huffman asked us to come to you guys.
Oh, curious. Yeah. Okay, interesting. Very good. And then to Jerry's remaining points.
So as I understand, and I'd like to be able to hand this to you, and I wish that we had a So I'm going to work from this map, and I apologize for not having more copies of the map available. But so in short, now what I understand, and correct me anybody if I'm wrong, is that the county has just under 500,000 acres of federal land in the county. Does that sound about right?
Quite a bit higher.
Oh, it's a lot more than that?
That'd be, yep.
Okay.
Big
Okay.
national park and Forest Service.
Between all of that. Okay, okay, so we're talking about like 600,000 acres, basically. Okay, so in the legislation, the reservation boundary would be adjusted within Del Norte County to follow this yellow line here. Now, and take note that the light green land is all Forest Service land. So the majority of the land that would be included in the revised reservation boundary within Del Norte County is Forest Service land. And the legislation doesn't change that. So that land, that huge light green, yellow, or light green chunk will stay Forest Service land. The legislation does not change that. So what that means is that the county would still receive all of your tax benefits that you get from that federal land if the legislation were passed and the reservation boundary was adjusted. Does that make sense? Okay. Right now, the light green sections here in 13N and 2E in that little block, those are lands that the tribe, I think we just closed on those lands. And so we own those in fee already. So we own those lands, and because we own them in fee, we're going to have to pay taxes on those. So really, within Del Norte County, the lands legislation does not affect your federal tax base.
Very good.
Yeah.
Supervisor.
Well, I guess my main point, I guess, is what it is that you can't do with a co-management plan that you can do by expanding the boundaries.
Okay, so what can't we do through co-management that we can do through expanding the boundaries? So what this, what it enables us to do, how I describe this, is that jurisdiction within Indian reservations is very complicated, right? And there's no clear line. It's a case-by-case scenario, and the Supreme Court is all over the place, and a teeny little fact will determine whether a tribe has jurisdiction or whether the state does. So in terms of what we might be able to do on this land that we can't just do through a cooperative agreement, somewhat relates to a jurisdictional question. We may be able to improve our argument that we have some kind of jurisdiction over that area if it's within our reservation boundary. But it's not an absolute argument. It's sort of like one arrow in our quiver that we could pull out and try to use to strengthen an argument for tribal jurisdiction. So that's the biggest distinction, is that when land is within your reservation, you can, it strengthens your argument that you have tribal jurisdiction over it. And that, quite frankly, helps us with a lot of, like, for example, the marijuana raids, right? Like, we have, as you guys know, huge issues with marijuana grows. We have the cartel up there. Our members are unsafe. We want to be able to help. We want to be able to, deal with those folks and get them out of our community. And so that, having that land within our reservation helps with that jurisdictional argument of being able to remove those people. Also, this area here is the Blue Creek watershed, which is our, that's our high country, that's our spiritual country, along with other tribes in the area. And so we want to be able to protect that. We want to be able to work with the Forest Service, for example, to help manage that in a better way. Now that kind of gets more to the cooperative agreement component and what the purpose of that cooperative agreement is. But the tribe has, a lot of technical resources, a lot of expertise on how to improve salmon habitat through that area, and that's what we'd like to be able to do there.
And I don't see that you can't still do those. That's my issue, and I don't know what jurisdictional. I mean, you talk about cannabis or those types of things, which I agree with you should be eradicated, whether it's Forest Service land, whether it's tribal land. I don't disagree with you, and I think they should be. And if you could help to do that, I think that would be wonderful. But I don't see how expanding the boundaries changes what you can do or what you can't do. I guess that's my big issue.
And I share Supervisor Hemmingson's concerns in that respect. And I guess I would ask the question, I know there's federal law that specifically works towards federal agencies go beyond cooperation, but in consultation with tribes. Can you reflect on that a little bit if you know the specific language in that federal legislation?
So there's, I think you're talking about federal law that would help facilitate tribes, tribal land management with the federal government?
Or, so if, as Jerry said, the projects that you just outlined, those government agencies are required to a certain extent to consult or coordinate with tribes.
So tribal consultation broadly would require federal agencies to consult with Indian tribes in the event that an action they're taking affects an Indian tribe's interest. Now there's an executive order under the Obama administration that tried to give that some teeth. But one thing we've really struggled with at UROC is that there really is no teeth in those consultation laws. So sure, they come and meet with us and they say, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z. We express our concern, and then that's it. Nothing happens. They go forward with the project, and that's that.
Right.
Welcome to our world.
Right? So we have a common enemy there. So what we've tried to do is use this legislation and really think about, well, what could we put in federal law that would improve that relationship? And so that's where we came back to Section 3 of the legislation, which would authorize the tribe to have a role in the NEPA process, so the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. That's a land use kind of planning statute that requires federal governments, when you have a major action, to engage in environmental review. So, we've all heard about our environmental impact statements, that kind of stuff, EIS perhaps. So what we've done is look at that statute and figure out, okay, well, that is the statute that requires federal land managers to plan and to go through this environmental review process. So could we increase our role in that process? And so the legislation does authorize us to play a bigger role in that process. Mostly we would be, in certain circumstances, a part of developing the environmental review document, which is helpful because then you're able to pick the alternative that the federal government chooses to move forward with.
So let's flip that real quick.
Yeah.
So this is, if a project were to occur on federal lands, whether from National Park, Forest Service, just because those are the big landowners in our backyard that you'd be working with. Let's flip that. Let's say the Yurok tribe wants to do a project on those lands. Is there anything within that legislation that assists you doing a project, whatever that project might be, on federal lands? Like, let's take, for example, your experimental forest. Has the tribe been able to do any work in the experimental forest?
So with the legislation or without it?
With or without it? I mean, what enables the Yurok tribe to do work within federal lands currently?
Really, it's sort of, I mean, we make arguments, right? Sometimes the Tribal Historic Preservation Act provides protections for culturally or religious, sacred sites and that kind of thing. Then you have to have Section 106 permit that allows, I don't know, some work, some involvement with the tribe. We can now, if we wanted to do something, there's nothing that, I mean, it depends, I guess if you're talking about on reservation, let's say it's national park on our reservation, right, the mouth of the river. We have gone to the national park several times and said, we want to do X, Y, and Z. And we are at their mercy, basically, about whether they choose to allow us to do that. There's nothing that says, they are mandated, or there's nothing that says the tribe has like a veto power or, something like that that requires them to do what we want them to. And even in the legislation, if the legislation was passed, we don't have veto authority. We don't have ultimate control. The federal government retains that right as owners of the land.
So so you're still going to have difficulty whether or not potentially the reservation boundary adjusts or not, potentially, in coordinating or having some influence over these federal agencies on a project within your backyard. And I'm going to call your backyard your traditional Aboriginal territories.
Or even within our reservation. Absolutely. And there's nothing, in my opinion, we spent a lot of time looking at like, well, what could we do? How can we make things better? And the only way really is, to have absolute ownership of the land. But that's not feasible for us in an area where there's so much federal land.
Okay. I don't want to hog the mic. Is there any comments? Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Amy, just let's review this because we went through this a couple of times before. We're talking about a 1,200-acre parcel, is that correct? Now, and I don't remember the exact number, but a very small portion of it is Del Norte County, isn't that correct?
So all of the 1,200 acres in the experimental forest that would be transferred to the tribe and trust is in Del Norte County.
Okay.
But I believe that's only 0.2%, if not smaller, of your total federal land base, because it's, 1,200 acres and we're talking 600,000 acres. So it shouldn't have a big impact on your tax revenues.
Well, I said this before and I'll say it again. The prosperity of the tribe is directly attributable to the prosperity of Del Norte County. And this is important for your tribe. I know there are other issues that are not coming up today, including the creation of on building up the fire district in South Klamath. I know that the Yurok tribe is going to be a player in this. There are many other issues that I support this letter of support, because I think with this letter of support it sends a clear message that you guys, meaning the tribe, and Del Norte County are truly partners, and that we face these issues in South Klamath, there are a lot of complicated issues which are devoid of services. I know you're going to be partners with us in helping solve those problems. So I support your letter of support.
Thank you.
Supervisor?
I only had a couple concerns last week and asked, and one of them goes back to Humboldt County. And I'm still kind of confused as why you haven't gone to Humboldt County first when they're a larger player into this. And then again, the 1,200 acres just coming off the tax roll. I know Chairperson Matz has said that you have no intent, but I think I would like something stronger than that. And I don't know how we get that. I mean, are you guys willing to put that in writing, that you have no intent of taking it off the tax rolls? Is that something you guys have talked about?
Well, I think it's two different issues on that component. So the 1,200 acres would be put into trust for the tribe. But as far as I understand, when you have trust land in your county, the county is then eligible for impact aid funding. And so even though it goes into trust, that doesn't cut off your ability to receive funding for that. I mean, I don't want to drop a bomb where everyone's like, really? Wow.
That's the first I've heard of that.
But that's my understanding of how that works. Whether that's comparable to your taxes, I don't know. But I just wanted, right, absolutely. And but so I do want to be clear that the 1,200 acres would go into trust. Now, I think the other issue that you're pointing out is, so with respect to, and I'll just hand.
No, I'm holding it. I can see it perfectly on the screen.
Oh, good. That's wonderful. I'm so glad. Okay, so the lands in 13N and 3E, I think those are the concern about whether eventually, if those lands were within our reservation, if we would then try to get them into trust sometime in the future. So all I can say is that what that would require, because these are Forest Service lands, and the legislation does not transfer those Forest Service lands to the tribe. So we would have to either in the future go back to Congress to ask for another piece of federal legislation to transfer those lands to the tribe, or work with the Department of Interior through their administrative process to get those lands into trust. But either process would require us to come back to you guys and get your approval, just like we're doing now. So, in no shape or form would we be able to take this into trust without coming back to you guys and asking for that. Do I wish that was different?
Sure. Let's address quickly Supervisor Cowan's question, because that's kind of the first that I had also heard of, some kind of compensation, reparation for lands going into trust.
Do you want me to talk about
if you could opine on that really quick?
I mean, I hadn't heard about that, or hadn't thought about that much until this moment. But as far as my understanding, and Amy's might be able to help with this, impact aid funding is basically federal funding, and my understanding is that most of it comes from Department of Education, and it offsets if there's property taken off of the tax rolls because there's a military base in the area, or there's a tribal reservation in the area, and so there's not that same tax base, especially for those count of children there, then certain impact aid funding would go to the school district, especially to offset that. And so I don't think it's the exact same as far as the county's general fund, how it would come in, but that would be, something that we could look into and discuss. But it's basically, it comes down from the federal government for when land is not on the tax rolls.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Supervisor Berkowitz.
I'm concerned you're referring to this legislation, but there is no bill. In fact, we are 6 months into a new Congress. There's no bill. So if we're talking about the previous bill, I'm all for that. But I don't see how I could be for a bill that's not written yet, because we don't know what's going to be in that bill. Hopefully, we're assuming that everything that's in the prior legislation is going to be in this legislation. But we don't know that for sure, do we?
So the process that Huffman has asked us to engage in is to go out to stakeholders and to share a draft of the bill that he is considering introducing. So the draft of the bill that you all received in the previous presentation would be the draft that's introduced. And so Huffman's the keeper of the, I don't know what you want to, I'm looking
Keeper
for
of the legislation.
Yeah, exactly. So, he's also controlling the process. So, he had asked us to come to you guys, present the current draft of the legislation, and he has said that, we need to, that it would basically be introduced as it is now. So I don't expect any major changes to what you see. Now, it could be introduced as it is, and then once it gets to committee, that's out of all of our hands. But he has asked us for the letter now. And I think he's looking at it as he wants to make sure that there's no surprises if he were to introduce the bill. He doesn't want the county to say, oh, UROC never talked to us. We want to make sure the county's okay before I move on this. That's what he's thinking.
Okay. And when we were in Washington, D.C., that does reflect the conversation we did have with Congressman Huffman, and I know he reflected on that conversation at lunch, specifically looking for the board's opinion on this letter, pro or con, to come to him to know what our thinking is, and hopefully we could, as we're having this robust discussion, we could figure out what that letter might entail.
Yep.
Supervisor.
Yeah, and I hate this that they put us in this position. Really, I mean, it's not. I mean, it makes it sound like we're opposed. Now, if you take the experimental forest, and it was written up correctly, to where I think that you guys can get money and you can fix it up. I think that's good for my grandkids. I think that's good for Jack's grandkids. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking after Jack's grandkids too, believe it or not. And I don't like that they put us in this position to decide whether you're going to expand your boundaries when I think that's a federal decision. Mm-hmm. And to think that it's not going to impact us, I think is just wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's wrong on their part to put this pressure on us that we have to be adversaries, and I don't want that to happen. Mm-hmm. And in the way it stands right now, I would have to vote in opposition to a support letter. Mm-hmm. And I will try to find some smoked salmon someplace to give back to you so that I can get back in your good graces. I'm not trying to make this an us against them kind of thing. I don't think that's what it is. There's impacts that affect the entire county, which we're trying to look out for the entire county. Jack's grandkids, my grandkids, anybody else who's got grandkids.
I think it would help us to understand what those impacts are.
Me also. I don't know exactly what those impacts are down the road. That's what I'm saying, is I don't know if that land that is in fee trust land now, or fee land now, is going to be put into trust. I don't know that in the future. I don't know in the experimental forest if there are harvesting activities that are going to happen in the future that the county is not going to receive any yield tax or timber resources from that we would have received because it was Forest Service land. There's no tax implications as far as I know about that land because it's already forest land. That's why I don't have a lot of heartburn over that particular piece. And I think you guys can improve it, whereas evidently our federal government can't. So those kind of things that I think are positive impacts, I can get behind. It's the unknown part that I have a hard time with.
The deal with the experimental forest is that it'll stay an experimental forest. It is controlled by an outfit with the Forest Service down out of Sacramento. And a group of our people went down there and met with them. They will still be able to come up and do as they've been doing, which hasn't been anything, and experiments. No trees will be cut for profit. If anything falls down, we're allowed to take them out and use for ceremonial, for houses or canoes, whatever. We've already went in and taken 2 logs out that were cut down years ago. I mean, you couldn't even tell there was a log laying there. Pushed them, they got them out, and there was a nice log laying there. And but it won't be used for anything commercial, as to say logging. There won't be no housing going in there in the experimental forest. It's going to stay an experimental forest. And as far as our reservation boundary goes, if we get our reservation boundary the way we want it, it'll give us control over all the property there. We can go in and we can take the cartels out. Right now, Humboldt County is issuing permits to the pot growers up there. They're not coming to us and asking us to get anything. They're issuing them water rights, surface water that is supposed to go down into the river, and a lot of it goes to our people up there. Their creeks are drying up. And for what? So they can grow their marijuana. They're supposed to already have what they're going to use already put in ponds or tanks. But no, they don't. Once they get their permit, they do whatever they want. And we have no control over that because it's not part of our reservation. If we can expand our reservation, we can have some control over it. That not only goes for Humboldt County, it goes for Delaware County too. Right now, we don't have that problem around here, but we can. So, okay, thank you.
Jack, while you're right there.
Don't leave, Jack, because I got a question too.
Yeah. Now you're talking about Humboldt County is giving permits to growers on private land?
On the fee land within the boundaries of the reservation and next to the reservation, they're given permits. If you applied for a permit, they're giving you a certain amount of time. You can go in there and start growing.
I guess I was just confused because I thought the map that I was looking at was all Forest Service land that you were taking in to the reservation boundary in Humboldt County. So
He's just talking about like within the reservation, Humboldt County right now is giving permits for marijuana cultivation for the fee land in the reservation.
And adjacent, right? You know, if it's close to the reservation.
And this would give you the power to stop that if it was in the reservation?
It would help us control that that portion of it. It would give us right now we're 0 tolerance. If our reservation boundaries expand, we're 0 tolerance. That means you can't grow within the boundaries of our reservation.
But yeah, that's a very interesting point. So that's probably why he didn't ask you to go to Humboldt, because Humboldt's not going to like that very much. So how, if they're already, you know what I mean? Now all of a sudden, if they are already issuing the permits, how are you going to backtrack that? What are you just going to go in and clear all their grows and say, and just take back the permits? How is that going to be handled?
That's something we have to play with in the future.
So this has been a great discussion, and one that's long overdue, and we really appreciate the Yurok tribe's time in coming and having this open dialogue with the board. And to that extent, we've been asked today to potentially support the proposed legislation that's coming forward, assuming that it looks very similar to the legislation that was proposed last year. And I'd like to ask the question of the board, because I'm seeing some dialogue on both sides of this, and my comfort level might not necessarily be terrific right now with the expansion of the reservation boundary, but my comfort level specific to the experimental forest, co-management, Bald Hills Road, although that does not lie in Del County, but in Humboldt, might be a heck of a lot higher in proposing a letter of support. Is this an all or nothing proposition for the tribe at this point, that we support the entire piece of legislation, or could we potentially write a letter of support that kind of broke out some components that we as the county would be supportive of at this point? How would you prefer that?
Well, I think what I would prefer is maybe an offline discussion to go through all of those issues and get to the heart of the concern, so that we could get to a full support letter. And I guess that would be one preference. The other preference is we go forward with a sort of multi-phase, or not multi-phase, but a multi-part level
it's baby
approval
steps.
letter. Yeah.
It is literally
yeah.
baby steps for
Yeah.
the county to help address some of what I'm
Yeah.
hearing is concerns from the board at this point.
And if I could, you know, to go along with what Supervisor Berkowitz said, without seeing the legislation, we kind of got caught up in this before when we supported a portion of this, that the presentation was not exactly accurate to the board at the time, or at least we didn't feel that it was, and we supported something that we didn't realize we were supporting because the legislation was different. And so I think to sign on with a letter of support before we actually see some sort of legislation that we can tweak and have a conversation about, I think would be very difficult. I think Bob's right on with that.
Well, Supervisor Berkowitz.
Thank you. You know, the concern that I had was not seeing that legislation. Talking about the draft legislation, if we sign on to the draft legislation, I think we're okay, because if they're going to change what we have approved as far as our letter is concerned, then it makes that letter basically moot, because we're only approving the draft letter supporting, or excuse me, the letter supporting the draft legislation. So, you know, I would be in support of that letter supporting the draft legislation.
Well, if you read the letter, you know, I've got it up. The first paragraph I have no problem with. The second one, not so much, you know, the same thing. It's saying that we're okay with him to introduce it. It's not even really talking. It's introducing lands legislation. It doesn't, I guess it does talk about the well, it's the letter up here, that's the old one, right?
This is the one that was drafted for our last meeting.
Okay, yeah. So, but I'm saying the legislation number, if there's no legislation, what is that number tied to? The old one?
I don't think you'd need to have a letter, I mean, a number. You could just say the Yurok Lands Act. That's what
And I
Huffman's
understand what you're
office
saying,
is
but I'm
referring
looking at a
to.
letter that was given to me in support of you, and it does have a number on it. You know, and it talks about working with you guys, and that's exactly what we want to do, and we want to improve our local community and the lands and stuff, and all that is great. But like Bob's saying, it's not talking about proposed legislation. It's got a number on it, which I don't think we should be doing. That's, you know, we need to kind of adjust this letter, I think.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Supervisor Gitlin.
Amy, just a quick question. Is this new legislation going to be appreciably different in any way, shape, form than the one submitted by Congressman Huffman in the last section of the last Congress? That's what I was told. I was told this is essentially, we're going to resubmit that legislation, which I think everybody on this board was on board with. maybe I'm wrong in interpretation, but I see this as just bringing it back into the new Congress in the same form. Will of course have a different number to it, but it's essentially the same. There's no surprises in this new legislation. Thank you very much.
Okay, so what I'm seeing right now is that there's no way, shape, or form we've got consensus to move forward with a letter of support, even as drafted by our CAO. And I see an opportunity here for the tribe to kind of address offline some of those concerns as you've expressed. And maybe that might be the best approach. And so we would rely on you to approach individual supervisors that have kind of discussed some of those concerns with you publicly here today offline, and potentially bring that back to the chair at some point in the near future as you see this legislation evolving, and hope that we could all come to some kind of consensus here in the near future to support whatever that Yurok lands legislation might look like. If that works for you, I think without taking a vote here today, which I don't think would benefit this discussion. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Councilman?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to just ask you. Let's go ahead and recess for 5 minutes, and we'll return at 12:40 to resume the agenda. It'll give everybody a chance to stretch their legs and use the restroom if possible. get back to session. All right, we've got item number 37 that we'll move to discussion on, which is concerning local streets and roads.
Chairman?
Yes.
I just heard from the chief probation officer, he's got to go to court.
Okay, does he have a...
possible the one item can be brought forward on the budget? It would be
42.
item 42.
I am sorry, I missed that one. Yes, it would be possible to bring that forward right now. I expected Supervisor Gitlin to keep me in line on these budget items.
It's kind of hard jumping around this.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and bring it forward. Chief?
So I'm bringing this today as the chair of the Community Corrections Partnership. This is our annual plan and budget. Not a whole lot of change since last year. Our expected revenue coming in is basically the same. We've shifted around some funds to try and establish a new program, a pretrial program, which is going to help hopefully alleviate some of the overcrowding in the jail issues, as well as put people on track to either get diverted on their criminal cases or get plugged into services sooner in the process, things like that. That's been the big change. To try and offset some of the jail's costs as well, we brought out some money that was set aside several years ago and added that to the inmate reimbursement for them.
Very good. Thank you. Comments from the board for the chief? All right, let's go ahead and open it up for public comment. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Do we have a motion on the table?
I would move to approve the Public Safety Realignment Plan for 2017-18.
A second.
We have a motion, a second. Kylie, can you please pull the vote?
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Chair Howard?
Yes. I'm going to take item 43 then next. I'm hoping this will be a little quick. Approve and authorize the chair to send a letter of opposition regarding AB 1250 that would impose a de facto prohibition on the county's nonprofits who deliver vital services to local residents as requested by our CAO. Mr. Serena?
There has been a very concerted effort through RCRC and CSAC in many, many counties to do what they can to kill this bill. It is very restrictive, and it's even more restrictive for the small counties.
Right.
It will limit us on our contracting. And so we have talked with our lobbyists in Sacramento. They've been on this from the beginning, but now CSAC is asking for a letter.
Sure. Any comments from the board, Jerry, as CSAC rep? Or
Yeah,
RCRC rep?
RCRC is way opposed to it. All the counties were opposed to this bill. It kind of handcuffs them a little bit on what they can do as far as contracting services. So I would make the motion to approve and authorize the chair to sign the letter of opposition regarding AB 1250.
Very good.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's open it up for public comment. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Kylie, can you please pull the vote?
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Chair Howard?
All right, yes. Item number 37, discussion of our local streets and roads. And I see we have a great person in front of us that might be able to help us out with this discussion. Mr. Barnes, are you going to take the lead on this for us?
Yeah. So there's been a question on the uncontrolled intersections in the Filkins track, and we had 4 in particular that were questioned.
Correct.
And so as a general overall statement, uncontrolled intersections aren't necessarily uncontrolled. They just, what happens is the first person that gets there gets to go through, and that tends to be the control. And these are very common in residential areas. You don't find them really anywhere else. And the idea is that you have driveways, you have kids walking around, and so drivers naturally tend to go slow through those areas. And when you get your driver's license, one of the questions is how fast can you go in a residential area? And the speed limit, although it is not posted is 25 miles an hour is the maximum speed, and most people tend, if they're thoughtful, to go slower than that, and if they're older, because they've had a few more close misses. So as people come to these uncontrolled intersections, usually there's plenty of time to see, there's plenty of time to stop, and you don't have very many accidents at those intersections. And so it costs money to control them. People tend to like to go through them when they get there instead of having to kind of wait, because people are going slow. If you come up to a yield or a stop, you have to wait quite a while. And so, and then the other issue comes down to changing the way things are in a area. And when you change things, it upsets people, and it kind of confuses them because they're kind of used to the way things are. Unless we find there are accidents for one reason or another, or there becomes some obstructions as things grow in the area, and or something changes to cause somebody to want to change it. So that's kind of where the county is. It costs us money to put things up. It's confusing. And so those are the reasons I kind of indicated I thought we ought to leave them as they were.
Very good. Supervisor.
Jim, is there any sight distance issues with any of these intersections where we would have to think about slowing one side down more than the other? Do you think that's an issue?
Well, when I was out looking at these intersections, I saw that we had some shrubs and things growing up to where there is some sight issues on a couple of them. And so that's something that can be addressed. And that's generally what happens. It isn't that something major changes, like somebody builds a house or a fence, although that can happen too. We have fences that get so close you can't see, but generally shrubbery, and people let things go and it starts growing out more and more into the intersection.
I think that's a terrific observation, and piggybacking on that, because I do a lot of shopping in those neighborhoods on the weekends, and it becomes a huge problem with that shrubbery or fencing obscuring your vision in these uncontrolled intersections. Is there a way for us to have conversations with those landowners?
Yeah, we certainly can call. We can talk to the landowner or the people renting the houses and see if we can't get the stuff cut.
Supervisor Cowan.
So this all started with me contacting you guys, and actually it started with a couple constituents who reached out. Some in District 1, actually a few of them in District 1, and somebody from mine as well, and the concerns with it. And I got your response, and I understand all that, and that's great. I think at the last meeting, what I was requesting is you say there's a cost. I want to know what the cost is. I want to know what is the cost to the county to put up a yield and or a stop, not a four-way, just a two-way. I want to understand that.
Okay, the general costs to the county is the signs. There's 3 levels of stop visibility things that we do. And because one of the main problems is somebody's coming along and they think some guy's going to stop. Well, the guy doesn't notice the stop, so that can be a problem too, because he's feeling pretty good about going through. But if when you're coming to an uncontrolled, both parties should be thinking about, all right, what's this guy going to do? So the cost is the stop sign itself, and that can be the only thing put at an intersection. Generally, we put a line down on the street so that if people aren't looking up, they should see the road ahead of them anyway and see that there's a line. And the third thing we put on there is the word stop written on the road. And so those are the 3 costs. And because people drive over them, it's not like a center line where you should be staying off of it. It's something every time you go through there you're driving over, so then it needs to be refreshed as the years go by. So those are the costs. There's the initial cost of doing it, which is a few, let's say to do that would be $1,000.
Okay.
And then there would be, let's say, $100, maybe not $100, $50 a year that would add up to where you would then repaint, put up a new sign, just the sign portion unless somebody hits it.
So it's not a huge cost.
No, 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 no. These aren't huge costs. This is,
Supervisor Gitlin.
Jim, we've talked about this before. Matter of fact, we dealt with a hedge situation on Cooper and Amador, corrected this, but there's virtually no accident activity in over 5 years. Is that correct? There's been no incidents there. And I've looked into these. Del Norte is a north-south street, as is Calaveras, and there are no incidents. I'm really concerned about the unintended consequences of putting up a bunch of yield signs, and that might be problematic, might create more problems. People need to get around and they need to drive safely. Since there's no activity of any negativity in there, I don't see how changing this is going to improve it. Now, if there is in fact an issue with a bushes that are overgrowing and blocking, I hadn't seen that, but that's something that through code enforcement, there's a 4-foot limit, we can deal with that.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen that as part of this. I think people want to see traffic controlled slower, and I am very concerned about the unintended consequences of putting up several yield signs in this area as to creating a problem where there is no activity of negativity over these 5 years.
Thank you, Supervisor. And one of the points I'd like to make, in reflecting a little bit about Supervisor Gitlin's comments, as we know, there's a lot that we don't see. There's a lot CHP doesn't see. There's a lot Caltrans doesn't see. It's been the entire purpose of us creating our commonplace tool through the Del Norte County Department, or the Del Norte County Transportation Commission, so we could report those close calls. And there probably has been instances that don't get reported. Maybe they're reported to a supervisor, maybe they're not. I've experienced one myself within that area. Doesn't mean that it's not occurring. But if there's a way we could lessen potentially a conflict from occurring and save property damage or other factors by going out there and addressing the root cause, which might be somebody's, we couldn't address unfamiliarity with the intersection, but could address a specific instance where visibility is a concern, as Supervisor Hemmingson mentioned. I think we need to be more proactive in doing that. I'll leave it at that.
I just had one other thing. Jim, is there some effort that has to be put in to decide if you're going to do a two-way stop? Is there some effort into trying to figure out which way you put that two-way stop?
Yeah, what we tend to do, if we were starting out from scratch, then we would have something like 5th Street coming, we would have these major roads where people can get around a little bit and not just, but in an area like that that's already been established, I think we would look at the patterns of stop signs and try to find one road that they can get over to, that they can go a little ways before they have to stop. So generally it's just a logical solution more than anything else, because the traffic patterns, there's not a lot of traffic on those, and the way we change the stop signs will change the number of cars on the street.
So there is some effort that has to be put in to figure all that out. So it's not just a matter of going out there and saying, we're going to put a stop sign here and a stop sign there.
No. And generally, we know through accident data more than anything else, and calls from people and residents at those intersections, if there's a lot of breaks and all this stuff going on, then they let us know, all right, we've got a problem that we have to deal with here. And so then when we get those problems, then we deal with them. There's always a problem when you change things, because now all of a sudden, if there's an accident at that intersection, now whose fault is it? Right after we change it. It may not be anybody's fault, it just may be the way things happened, but there's a question that comes up. But if things have been the same way for 50 years, then those questions don't come up as much.
But I think that's been the point of this discussion, and obviously folks have reached out to their supervisor to express some concern. Supervisor Cowan, I don't know if you want to close this conversation and
Well, I
offer
think
some
it's
direction?
important. I've had people who live in that area who have had close calls. I drive in that area. I just don't think they're safe. I know there's no accidents, or there's no reported accidents, but I can assure you there's been reported or there's been incidences. And to say that it's always been, it's been like that for 50 years, we have to keep it that way, I don't buy that. I think we need to be proactive. I think we need to look at it. You know, a yield is a yield. It's not that hard to put up a, you know, it's like Pebble Beach Drive. They fly down Pebble Beach Drive. You know, that doesn't mean just because it's always been that way, we keep it that way. We need to look at safety of our children. Those are areas that the high school kids are coming down. And I think it's important.
So you continue to ask the board to seek some kind of direction to Community Development Department to take a look at these intersections.
Now, is it these 4 intersections, or is it all the uncontrolled intersections in the county? I mean,
Those were the ones that popped up to me in my routes, you know. There's also, I got a call from 2 or 3 calls that concern some of these, not all of these. So those kind of were the ones. I know we had someone speak earlier today about, you know, J Street. So there's obviously a lot. I can't really.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so.
Help us out, Jim. You made a great presentation. There's some concern here being expressed by the supervisor for this district.
I mean, we certainly can put up yield signs, which I would prefer to put up over stop signs, because then I don't draw lines in the road and I don't do other things. That doesn't mean, it probably means if a driver's going to come up to a yield sign, they'll slow down. And the drivers, I think, that you're speaking of are a little bit on the irresponsible side anyway, because they're probably going a little too fast through there. Because when I would come up to a yield sign, it would be the same as if I was coming up to an uncontrolled intersection. You're going to yield to the fact there might be somebody coming through there too fast, and so you slow down at those. And so I can put up yield signs, but I'm not so sure, just personally, that's not what I would do. But I certainly understand where you're coming from. So that's why I was asking direction from the board, how they felt about it, because I think we all do this. We all drive and we all go through these things, so.
Well, let's go ahead and take some public comment on this item, if there is any at this time, and bring it back to the board. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring item 37 back to the board. Supervisor Gitlin, please.
You know, this harkens back to a conversation I had, my concern about Harold Street. Jim, you may remember that discussion we had on Harold Street. And so I went out there and I looked it over. I was very concerned about how southbound traffic would be flying over that blind hill, and you'd actually see sparks hitting the pavement as it went over the hill and hit the ground and went flying through right at Hoover. And there wasn't really any activity, except the neighbors really loudly complained to me when we walked in that area. And it worked in that case. Mm-hmm. These types of intersections are not egregious problems where you have wanton speeding like up and down Harold. This is a much different situation. It's a quiet residential area and people just normally drive slowly. There are going to be irresponsible drivers. There's no question about it. If you have them out there with people like, or motorcyclists, and they're going to drive up and down, but these are very low traffic areas. They're generally not used for pass-through areas. People go on Cooper, or they'll go up and down. If you were having a conversation about Inyo or El Dorado or Cooper, you'd have my full attention. Or if there was an intersection, or the blind intersection, Amador and Cooper, which was problematic. I just don't see how putting up yield signs is going to improve this. As a matter of fact, I think you're going to have a lot of unintended consequences that may make the matter worse. So I think that's what I heard you say, that you don't see that would help the matter, unless I misread you, that putting up yield or stop signs is going to help the matter. It's actually,
that's what I said, yeah.
Okay.
Supervisor Berkowitz.
You know, maybe the direction from the board might be to have you examine the sight lines and see if there are some obstructions like hedges and this kind of thing that would make it difficult for a person in that area. You know, I think that's probably the best way to go, and if we can cure those kinds of problems, then I think we've cured the situation.
Thank you. Supervisor
Personally,
Hamilton.
a hedge or something like that where I couldn't see would make me slow down more.
It does.
But some people don't see that as a slowing down thing. Well, I don't see anything, I'm just going through here, but that's just my personal view.
Sure. Director Kunstl, you have some comments?
Yes, I would like to just get a clarification if we could just focus on the intersections that Supervisor Cowan mentioned, because if we get into this for the whole area, it's going to take a significant amount of time, and I have a part-time county engineer. I mean, if that's how we want to spend our time.
Full-time.
Yeah, he does. But I mean, I'm just thinking as far as the resources that I have available to me to get a lot of things done. I mean, if that's your pleasure to have him do a grant, that's your pleasure.
Thank you.
But at this point, if we could focus on the four, I would
Understood. So do we
appreciate
have any
that.
consensus from the board on these 4 intersections? To direct staff to take a look at putting up yield signs, if I remember correctly. That would be the direction from the board, to look at putting up yield signs.
Well, you're going to make half the people happy and half the people are going to be pissed off, so take your pick.
I don't see us having consensus at this point. We'll go ahead and table this discussion. All right, we're going to move on with item number 38, which is to authorize the temporary closure of Humboldt Road between Roy Avenue and Highway 101 and Semi Road from Humboldt Road to Highway 101 for July 5th through October 2nd. And I believe you're back on board with us.
So the Elk Valley Rancheria has gotten a grant to reconstruct Humboldt Road from the highway to 300 feet or so south of Roy. And so as part of that, there's a roundabout at the intersection of Sand Mine and Humboldt. And there's utility poles and a lot of different things in the way that makes it almost impossible to build that unless we do close that road down. And as you know, if you're going down Sand Mine, it's very wet. It's like a slough on both sides. And so it's really restricted what you can do in those areas. And so in order to get this constructed in the quickest way possible, reconstruct Humboldt Road, which we're very thankful for, by the way, we would like to shut it down for that area and for that period of time. And one of the problems we have, we talked about putting a road around the construction work, but because for environmental reasons and coastal reasons, that became something we really looks like we can't do. So that's where we are, and that's what we'd like to do. And we've contacted Steve Wakefield to make sure that he would be okay with that. And he says they generally use Elk Valley anyway because they can put their sirens on and go through the lights and different things. But also the barricades on the highway would be movable in case of a real situation or something that happened to the construction guys.
I would move to authorize the temporary closure of Humboldt Road between Roy Avenue and Highway 101 and
Second.
Sand Mine from Humboldt.
We have a motion and a second. Let's go ahead and open it up for public comment. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Supervisor Gittler.
Jim, what's the impact to local traffic in terms of ingress or egress for those people up and down Humboldt Road who have to access their homes? There's an ability to get through there so they can get in and out.
Yeah,
access services, ambulance, things like that.
No, in the area that we're talking about closing off, nobody lives. and there's no businesses, there's nothing but the roads. And so the biggest impact is if a person was working in Klamath and lived on Roy, for instance, then he would have to come all the way into Elk Valley and come back around, and so that would take him another 5 minutes or so. But in general, there's minor impacts to people that would work in town, for instance, and be going over to the Birch Ocean View areas. So that's kind of where we are.
Thank you, Jim.
It'd be a time inconvenience.
Any further questions? Great. Glad to see this project finally come to fruition after many, 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 many years. Let's take a poll vote, please. Kylie?
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Chair Howard?
Yes. All right, we're going to go ahead and move to item number 39, consider and appoint Supervisor Berkowitz to the Federal Lands Policy Committee of the National Association of Counties, as requested by Supervisor Berkowitz.
Thank you,
Supervisor?
Mr. Chairman. At the last meeting, the board reached consensus on my request to have our board vote to approve my request to serve on the NACO Federal Lands Policy Committee. This committee will be attempting to extend the secure rural schools and community legislation that has expired, resulting in the loss of millions of dollars to our county road fund. Former Supervisor Finnegan served as our NACO representative when he was on our board. When I met with NACO representatives at the last CSAC conference, they strongly urged that I join the Federal Lands Policy Committee of NACO. Considering my extensive 16-year history with working to get the original SRCA legislation passed by Congress and signed by the President, I put in my application with a letter that detailed my work with Congress in getting the original bill passed. Subsequently, I received a letter of acceptance by the President of NACO. Unfortunately, I was unaware that I needed board approval before I could serve on this policy committee. So today I'm asking for a vote from this board of my acceptance to be a member of the Federal Lands Policy Committee of NACO.
Thank you, Supervisor. Discussion from the board. Supervisor?
Yeah, I don't ever remember us having a representative for this particular committee. What costs are involved?
Basically, there's one meeting a year, and the rest is done by basically the internet.
And the cost is?
The cost, if it were in Washington, which it's not this year, but if it were in Washington, it would probably be about the same cost that you had for your meeting.
And
actually a little bit more because there's 3 days involved instead of one.
Yeah, they usually carry on. I guess I wasn't aware of this committee working on SRS.
That is the committee.
That's all they work on?
No, they work on that plus anything that has to do with federal lands.
Yeah, I don't know what the...
So the costs associated with this right now is specific to travel to the annual?
Correct. The registration cost and the travel.
Okay. But you're not asking to be the county's NACO representative, you're asking specifically to be a representative on the Federal Lands Policy Committee.
Well, I think
once annually.
Sure, if I was on the Federal Lands Policy Committee, I think it would be a normal assumption that I would be the board's representative in NACO. It wouldn't make sense to have one as the representative and the other as the Federal Lands Policy person and sending two people back there.
Yeah, and in developing this discussion a little further, I know this this could potentially be a hit to our travel budget, so I wanted to flush this out. As I know Supervisor Finnegan specifically traveled to those conferences through three mechanisms, essentially through a service through Western Regions, through RCRC, and through CSAC that generally compensated the county for those travel costs over his terms, long terms.
Right. There were terms, a number of terms, when the county provided the funds for that because he was not on the policy committee of CSAC.
Yeah, and I did check into that, and that's not factual, actually.
Really?
His travel costs were picked up during all those trips. by those three groups that he was involved in at that time, and that was Western Regions and CSAC and RCRC. But before us, and we'll continue the discussion, I'm not sure if the other supervisors need or want to weigh in at this time, is to appoint Supervisor Berkowitz to the Federal Lands Policy Committee, and not necessarily as a representative of the board to NACO. Any other comments at this time? Okay, let's go ahead and open it up for public comment. Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Do we have a motion on the table?
I'll make that motion for board appointment of Supervisor Berkowitz to the Federal Lands Policy Committee of the National Association of Counties.
Very good. We have a motion on the table.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Kylie, can you please pull the vote?
Supervisor Hemmingson?
I'm going to say no.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Chair Howard?
No. All right, that motion carries. We're going to move to our last item, which is item number 40, which is consider miscellaneous legislative and budget matters pertinent to the County of Del Norte. Are there any such items at this time, Jay?
There are several, but for expediency's sake, what's on the agenda is currently what we're proposing from the staff level, and I believe there might be some discussion from one of the supervisors. Budget-wise, we've pretty well gone over that one today, and it's in front of you.
All right, so Supervisor Berkowitz?
On my May 23rd the board by consensus at that meeting approved the discussion action item concerning the no net loss policy be put on the agenda at a future board meeting. I'd like to request that we now calendar that request for an August meeting. What's your pleasure?
And when would you like it calendared?
In August.
In August.
Right.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball and can't look that far ahead, but I know we should have this discussion. I think it's, maybe we'll look towards that last meeting in August, assuming that everybody's here. I think the full board does need to be present.
Okay.
By consensus?
Yes.
Sure.
Jerry?
Yeah. Are you going to put together a board report for it, though?
I will.
And just so that we have the pros and cons of what your discussion is going to be about. Yeah.
Okay, so we have some direction. Supervisor Berkowitz will prepare a report for the board specific to the county's no net loss policy. Kylie, if you could look to agendize that for our second meeting in August.
To continue on June 20th, Supervisor Gitlin and I attended the meeting of True North held in Klamath. Purpose of the meeting was to find ways to to bring the community together around the improvement of youth recreation in the area. It was agreed that we could develop a long-term partnership with the Yurok Tribe, Presidini Rancheria, the Yurok Indian Housing Authority, and True North to work together to accomplish these mutual goals. I had a meeting with Heidi Kunstl regarding the proposed improvements on Humboldt Road, which we basically just discussed. Met with Wes White of Hambro to discuss his plans for future projects that will improve the area. Supervisor Gitlin and I had a meeting with Lonnie Levi of the Klamath Fire Protection District. They've gone from having no volunteers just 3 months ago, and they now have 6. And seem to have revived interest in getting people in the area to want to volunteer. Last week I attended the meeting of the Chamber Mixer at Recology, and last week I also attended a meeting of the Chamber of Commerce where I presented an idea for a fundraiser that was accepted by the group. And one last thing, at long last, legislation that would fund EAS for 5 years in increasing amounts was introduced in the House of Representatives last week. H.R. 2997 was introduced by the Transportation and Infrastructure Chairman Bill Schuster, longtime chairman of that committee. The main purpose is to transfer operation of air traffic services currently provided by the FAA to a separate not-for-profit corporation entity, and to reauthorize programs for the Federal Aviation Administration. This bill is 333 pages long. Inside it is tucked a provision for EAS to be funded in increasing amounts through fiscal year 2023, and that would definitely help us. Schuster is a real influential member of this committee, but other members include Peter DeFazio, Jared Huffman, and Doug LaMalfa. This is a bipartisan bill right now with 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. So I would hope that we could persuade NACO, RCRC, and CSAC to sign on as supporting this bill, and to get all of the members of the Aviation Subcommittee to co-sponsor this bill, including those members that I just mentioned. Hopefully, you'll be able to bring back some more information at our next meeting, and we can discuss this further.
Board, there's probably going to be a letter of support that might originate out of this in the future. If by consensus, this seems like a high priority for us, would direct staff to look into it further, maybe have discussions with Mr. Burns to see where it's at in committee, and what kind of chance that we have for this to succeed. So a letter might be appropriate by consensus. Yes. Very good. Is that it?
And that's my report.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Supervisor Hemmingson.
Yes, Chair, thank you. As we all did, after our last meeting, we held interviews for the Director of Child Support Services, which we hired today. I went to Eureka for the North Deal meeting. A lot of discussions over last chance grade, the amount of money they've, we probably all of us know that they're going to put another $35 million into last chance grade to help shore it up. They're going to continue on. They're going to keep that road open. Some discussions on Richardson's Grove as well as 199, 197 project. That's still waiting in litigation, so we'll see what happens out of that. Had a meeting with John Driscoll out of Congressman Huffman's office, as well as Ryan Henson, who's with Cal Wild, and Jeff Morris out of Trinity County, and I can't remember who he's with. Huffman is proposing, and he's not wanting to call it a wilderness bill, but for the life of me, I can't remember what he did call it, but they want to add more wilderness area to Delmark County, Trinity County, Humboldt County, and Mendocino County. And at this point, they're not, in my opinion, not offering up enough for us to consider another layer of regulation over the forest that we've already got. Had a Delmark Local Transportation Commission meeting. I'll go through this pretty quick since we're running late, although I do have to say that I went to my granddaughter's moving up ceremony, I think they call it anyway. She's out of preschool and on her way into kindergarten. Went to RCRC, a lot of stuff going on there, a lot of bills, support for AB 668, which is the Voting Modernization Bond Act. We're opposed to small cell wireless infrastructure permitting, support for the federal, which I had to abstain on because this board has not taken a position on the marijuana ordinance, so I felt that I should stand down from that. But the rest of the group voted to support H.R. 975, which was to respect the state marijuana laws, and then support for H.R. 2215, which is the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act of 2017, which allows banking of a lot of cash. So I think in the long run, regardless of whether the marijuana laws are respected or not, how that turns out has really nothing to do with that particular bill. We had several presentations while I was down there also from the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. We had a budget update. We had presentations on tree mortality from the task force, discussions on the Clean Water Act and the definition of waters of the U.S. While I was down there, I got a chance to meet with Jason Miles and Senator McGuire. We had a very short time with Senator McGuire, but we did talk about SB 1250 and the jet fuel tax. Also, while we're there, of course, we always go through the Golden State Finance Authority, where we looked over the financial statement, which that outfit is in absolutely great shape. And then an issue that we've got with the Environmental Services JPA, or at least I have an issue with it, and I just don't think I'm the one that should be there. I think somebody from Solid Waste should be there, because these are the discussions that we have, and somebody that's in control there, staff, somebody from staff, I think, should be going to these meetings. So I think if you're on the Solid Waste JPA, I think we need to have somebody be put on that to make sure that they go to the meetings. They're very informative. There's a lot of stuff that I wasn't even aware of that they do about the battery recycling, which you think is no big deal. And I'm talking about flashlight batteries, rechargeable, non-rechargeable, the processes that they have to go through, and the product stewardship, and all these other things that are attached to all this, the recycling efforts. It's pretty important stuff, and I'm afraid it doesn't get very far with me. I make a report out here, but I don't meet with anybody from Solid Waste. So I think there needs to be somebody from staff there. That's usually who's there. There's only been one other supervisor there when I was there, and that's the chairman, and he wasn't even there this time. So there were no supervisors other than me that were at this meeting. We also talked about the stormwater permits, extended producer responsibility, the carpet care, the paint care, the mattress, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I think it should, I think that information should fall on ears that can actually put something into place and make it work. Also had a whale entanglement group conference call, and that was it for me.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Gittler.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'll try not to be too repetitive, but obviously after our last meeting on June 13th, we conducted interviews for the Child Support Services, and again, congratulations to Aaron Goodwin. Wednesday, June 14th, our local Transportation Commission met, and this is the time of year when budgets are prepared for next year, so lots of money was spent. Adopted several resolutions on what some may just term routine business, hardly routine. The Commission approved a resolution allocating up to about $536,000 in local transportation funding and up to $108,000 in state assistance funding to the Redwood Coast Transit Authority for, and on another resolution allocated another $64,000 funding for administrative planning and purposes. The local transportation by resolution allocated Federal Transit Administration funding, known as 5311 money. That totaled $431,000. So it was a good day for Redwood Coast Transit, and I say a good day in that they can continue their work. The Commission also voted to allocate $226,000 for bluff stabilization along Pebble Beach Drive, and the City of Crescent City requested and received $165,000 from the Regional Service Transportation Fund for water main repairs and replacement of about 200 feet of sidewalk along Harding Avenue, just east of El Dorado. Finally, the Commission received a last chance grade update, and Caltrans announced it will begin the geotechnical drilling to determine the feasibility of the selected alternate routes in question. I'd like to report there was a more expedient timetable discussion, but not yet. Right now, the road is slated for 2031 to 2039. Also attended with Supervisor Berkowitz the True North Klamath Community Connection for Youth Recreation. It was also one of the panel members was our Del Norte County Recreation Department there. This is centered to the program as administered by the Yurok Tribal Nation, which attracts all youth in various sports programs. Del Norte Recreation Department was as I said, part of this panel. I hope to report more on this subject as all of the panelists made commitments to move forward on this in July by the next time that group meets. We also dropped in, as Supervisor Berkowitz mentioned, a kind of an impromptu drop in at in the Klamath Fire District in Hunter Creek. We also discussed the lack of adequate fire protection services in Klamath, and we're going to continue to work with the tribe and all other interested parties to develop funding and volunteer staff, which the fire district is beginning to develop with help from the tribe to provide adequate fire services in South Del Norte County. Wednesday last of the Redwood Coast Transit meeting, as I already announced, the local transportation funding contributed quite a bit of funding for the next year's 2017-18 budget, which was approved at yesterday's at that meeting last week. There were some modest changes in Route 20 down to Del Norte County. Overall, there is a slight deficit of $45,000 in the budget, but we also realized that there was a surplus through the auditor's office of $224,000. So the actual surplus net was $177,000 in the in the black for the Redwood Coast Transit Authority. Finally, I underwent a colonoscopy last week, and I'm happy to report I got a clean report. That's good. I strongly recommend anybody 50+ years or older get a colonoscopy. And it's good advice. That's my report.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Cowan.
Well, I'm glad to say that, well, I'm not glad. I've got a short report. I've spent most of the last 2 weeks out of town. So while I was in town at a juvenile justice meeting, they're putting together a report that was being given to the judge as was talked about earlier in the meeting. They have been doing a lot of investigating. We've been doing a lot of interviewing over the last few months. Had a Chamber Ambassadors meeting discussing membership and the 4th of July activities that are coming up. Another meeting of Sutter Coast Hospital and the College of the Redwoods took place, so I had a brief update from Rachel Marlar, and everything is going really great and moving forward there. I met with Heather Snow from Health and Human Services, board prep with Jay, met with County Council, and then I spent the last 10 days with the family on a vacation, spent some time in Santa Barbara, went up the Old One. It was well needed and deserved, and glad to be back home. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor. As discussed, Child Support Services interviews, first 5 Children and Families Commission meeting with Greg Burns, and then in addition, the Del Norte Local Transportation Commission meeting, which was adequately covered here. Sat down and had some discussions with Jeff Harris, Superintendent of Schools. Went across to the other side of California to attend a state groundwater management discussion in Surprise Valley, and to see how they're dealing with the potential of wrestling with a low priority ranking that could potentially go to moderate, and how it affects those farmers, which could be quite interesting. The thing I found even more important, though, is that if that did occur, it resets the entire clock on the legislation and timelines they have to meet. Conducted agenda review, also solid waste meeting, where we covered both the budget approval and also our work plan for the year. Attended the Del Norte County Fish and Game Commission, welcoming the commissioners to our area. Not all commissioners were present. Some were out of the area due to deaths in the family. However, the commission meeting went off extremely well here. They want to continue to return to Del Norte County. I thought that was great because we rarely get them up here. It's been years since we've had them here in our backyard, especially when we're wrestling with issues specific to Del Norte County. we requested to make sure those issues are handled when they're here in our backyard. The barbecue that the Del County Fish and Game Commission threw for the commissioners in Jed Smith State Park was extremely well attended. Enjoyed seeing representatives from the city there, but also the one-on-one time that was had with local fishermen that did show up and express their concerns specific to the landing fees that have been proposed by the state, and in addition, rock or ground fish fishing and the curtailment of that fishing off our coastal waters, and how do we compete with landing here versus landing just across the border in Oregon is of great concern to many folks, both on our recreational sports side. But in addition, we addressed elk issues, and there was a lot of promise made by Chuck Bonham, who's the director of Fish and Game, and then also Stafford Lair, who's the deputy director, to ensure Del County they're going to get a management plan done. Director Bonham was extremely upset with the staff's progress to date. The management plan has not been prepared for elk. However, it's been in the works since 2003. It's a head shaker. The director knows it. Stafford Laird wants to bring staff, every staff member, whether they're in Region 1 or whether they're in Sacramento, up here at the beginning of October to talk with stakeholders in our community. So his staff knows the importance of elk to our community and what that means to getting this management plan for elk completed, and then also addressed with them a great deal of issues around state lands and the leases of those state lands that disappeared from our community 3 years ago, impacting our farmers. This will be followed up on in conversation with Senator McGuire this Friday. He's going to organize a meeting around state lands here with those affected, and state lands and elk will be addressed specifically during that discussion. Also attended a meeting with Senator McGuire in Petaluma, or sorry, not Petaluma, but Point Reyes on SB 1383, which passed last year on methane gas emissions. Rode down with some constituents from the Resource Conservation District. It was a long drive to discuss how methane gas emissions are going to be curtailed under this legislation over the next decade or so, but in respects to how it affects our local farmers, more specifically dairies, and how cows fart and belch, I found absolutely curious, because for our area there literally was no baseline in order to set a standard, which they said the baseline was 2013. So how dairies in our community, which is really the only methane gas source that potentially that they would be concerned with and releases from our landfill, how we begin to curtail our emissions by 40% by the year 2023 is going to be an awful interesting discussion without any baseline data to tell us what our emissions are currently. So this is just more legislation that has come down from the governor on greenhouse gas emissions, and how it affects our little tiny corner of the world is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I appreciate the senator bringing Air Resources Board and the California Department of Food and Ag to the table to have the discussion. And that was the end of my crazy couple weeks. Appreciate everybody's time and patience and sticking with us today. It's good to see everybody. Look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks. This meeting's adjourned.